The ink was still wet when Eliza realized what she'd done. Her hand trembled above the parchment, not from fear, but from the sudden, suffocating certainty that her entire life had just changed direction in the span of 3 seconds. Around her, the drawing room buzzed with congratulations meant for someone else. Her sister's engagement party, her sister's contract. Except the signature at the bottom wasn't her sister's name. It was hers. And the man across the mahogany table, Duke Adrian Blackthorne, all sharp angles and colder eyes, was staring at her like she'd just declared war. "Well," he said, voice like gravel scraped across ice, "it appears we have a problem." That's where this story begins. One mistake, one signature, one choice that shouldn't have mattered, except it did. If you want to know how an invisible woman became a duchess feared across 3 counties, how a man who controlled everything lost control of his own heart, stick around. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this wild story travels. You're not going to believe where this goes. The Wren family drawing room smelled like desperation disguised as rose water. Eliza knew that scent well, had been breathing it her entire 23 years. It clung to the faded velvet curtains her mother kept threatening to replace, settled into the threadbare oriental rug that had been expensive once, back when her father's shipping business still meant something. Now it just meant they were one bad season away from selling the silver. "Sit up straight, Eliza. You're slouching again." Her mother's voice cut through the late afternoon light like a letter opener, sharp, precise, designed to draw just enough blood to remind you it was there. Eliza straightened automatically, years of conditioning overriding the urge to point out that no one was looking at her anyway. They never did. Across the room, her younger sister Caroline practically glowed, perched on the edge of the settee like a bird about to take flight. At 19, Caroline had inherited their mother's classical beauty, all golden curls and porcelain skin and eyes that could make men forget their own names. She wore it like armor, that prettiness, like it could protect her from the reality of their shrinking bank accounts and their father's increasingly desperate business ventures. Maybe it could. It had certainly caught the attention of Lord Richard Ashford, whose family had money the way other people had dust, everywhere, unavoidable, and somehow Yongyuan accumulating. "The Ashfords should be here any moment," their mother fretted, adjusting Caroline's already perfect hair for the 3rd time. "Remember, darling, let Lord Richard's father do most of the talking. You simply smile and agree. Men prefer—" "Women who have opinions about nothing," Eliza muttered, just loud enough. Her mother's head snapped around. "Eliza, if you cannot contribute something pleasant, perhaps you should wait in the library. I'm here to witness the engagement contract signing. You asked me to be here. I asked you to be helpful." Her mother's smile had edges, not argumentative. Eliza bit back the response that helpful and silent weren't synonyms, but what was the point? This was Caroline's day, Caroline's triumph, Caroline's escape from a family that was slowly, elegantly drowning in debt, while pretending the water wasn't rising past their necks. She should be happy for her sister. She was happy for her sister. The jealousy was just a small, ugly thing she kept locked in her chest, right next to all the other small, ugly things well-bred women weren't supposed to feel. The doorbell's chime made her mother jump. "They're here! Caroline, remember?" "Smile and agree. I know, Mother." But Caroline's voice had gone thin, and Eliza recognized the fear underneath the words. Her sister might be beautiful, but she wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what she was signing up for. A marriage of convenience. A transaction. Lord Richard was nice enough, boring as dry toast, but nice. But his father was a different story. Lord Ashford Sr. had the kind of eyes that calculated your worth before you'd finish saying hello. The drawing room doors opened, and Eliza's father ushered in the Ashford contingent. Lord Richard entered first, pleasant-faced, slightly soft around the middle, the kind of man who'd never had an original thought but would reliably agree with yours. Behind him came the real power. His father, Lord Thomas Ashford, a barrel-chested man with silver hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. And behind them both, Eliza's breath caught. She'd heard of Duke Adrian Blackthorne the way you heard of storms and shipwrecks, as something that happened to other people, somewhere else, in stories designed to make you grateful for your own boring life. The Blackthorne family controlled half the mining rights in the Northern Territories, had a shipping empire that made her father's failed ventures look like children's toys, and enough political influence to make earls nervous. And the Duke himself was supposed to be made of ice and iron, incapable of human warmth, more interested in his ledgers than people. The rumors hadn't mentioned that he was young, maybe 30, or that he moved like violence wrapped in expensive tailoring. Tall, dark-haired, with a face that could have been handsome if it wasn't set in such unforgiving lines. Everything about him screamed control, from his perfectly knotted cravat to the way his gray eyes swept the room like he was cataloging assets. Those eyes passed over Eliza without pause. Of course they did. "Lord Wren!" Lord Ashford boomed, clasping her father's hand. "Wonderful to formalize this happy arrangement. May I introduce Duke Blackthorne? He's been good enough to stand as witness for our family. Your Grace," her father executed a bow that was probably deeper than necessary. "We're honored." The Duke inclined his head a fraction of an inch, the minimum required by politeness, the maximum permitted by his apparent allergy to human warmth. "Lord Wren, please, everyone sit." Her mother had gone into hostess mode, all fluttering hands and bright chatter. "We have refreshments, and then we can proceed with the signing. Such a joyous occasion." The joyous occasion involved a lot of small talk Eliza didn't listen to. She'd positioned herself in the corner chair, her usual spot, the place where overlooked daughters sat during important family business, and let the conversation wash over her like background noise. Caroline was performing beautifully, smiling at the right moments, laughing at Lord Ashford's jokes that weren't funny, looking adoringly at Lord Richard, who gazed back with the sort of mild affection you'd give a well-trained dog. This was what success looked like for women like them. This was victory. Eliza tried to feel victorious. Mostly, she felt tired. "Now then," Lord Ashford said eventually, pulling a leather document case from his coat. "Shall we make this official?" "Yes, yes!" Her mother practically vibrated with excitement. "Caroline, darling, come sit at the writing desk." The antique writing desk had been positioned in the center of the room like an altar. Lord Ashford withdrew several sheets of thick parchment, covered in dense legal script that probably said something like, "We promise to own your daughter in exchange for saving your family from bankruptcy," in fancier words. "The marriage contract," Lord Ashford announced, laying out the papers with reverence usually reserved for religious texts. "As discussed, the terms are quite standard. The union of Lord Richard Ashford and Miss Caroline Wren, the dowry arrangements, the settlement terms." Eliza's attention drifted. She'd seen the draft contract weeks ago, when her father had left it on his desk, and she'd been unable to resist reading it. Standard was one word for it. Suffocating was another. But it would save them. That's what mattered. "Miss Caroline, if you'll sign here." Lord Ashford indicated a line with his pen. "And Lord Richard here. The witnesses—" Actually, the Duke's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "I believe there's been an error in the documentation." Everyone froze. "An error?" Lord Ashford's bonhomie cracked around the edges. "Impossible. I had my solicitor—" "The dowry amount is incorrectly stated. The Duke hadn't moved, but somehow his presence had expanded to fill the room. Line 17, paragraph 3. The figure doesn't match what was agreed in the preliminary negotiations." Lord Ashford went slightly red. "I assure you, I was present during those negotiations. The discrepancy is £500. Silence. The kind that had weight. "I'll need to consult with my solicitor," Lord Ashford said finally, his voice tight. "This is highly irregular." "Take your time." The Duke's tone suggested he had all the time in the world and intended to use it, making people uncomfortable. Lord Ashford practically snatched up the papers. "Lord Richard, accompany me to the study. Lord Wren, if you have your copies of the negotiation terms—" "Of course, of course!" Her father jumped up, looking desperately at her mother, who was trying to keep her smile from shattering. "Will only be a moment," Lord Ashford announced to the room at large. "Please, everyone, remain comfortable." The men filed out, taking Caroline's future with them. Her sister's hands twisted in her lap, smile finally faltering now that Lord Richard wasn't watching. "How embarrassing," their mother muttered, though whether she meant the error or the Duke pointing it out wasn't clear. The Duke himself had moved to the window, staring out at the street like the humans in the room weren't worth his attention. Probably they weren't. Probably this whole affair, a minor noble's daughter marrying slightly up, was beneath his notice, and he was only here because Lord Ashford had called in some favor. Eliza studied him when she thought he wasn't looking, tried to find the human being underneath all that calculated coldness, wondered if it was lonely, being that controlled, that separate. Then his eyes met hers in the window's reflection, and she realized he'd known she was watching the entire time. She should look away. That's what polite, invisible daughters did. Instead, she held his gaze. Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or irritation, before he turned away. 20 minutes crawled past, then 30. Her mother's chatter grew increasingly strained. Caroline sat frozen, probably imagining the entire engagement collapsing over 500 pounds and a duke's inconvenient accuracy. Finally, the men returned. All sorted. Lord Ashford's cheerfulness sounded forced. Simple clerical error easily corrected. Shall we proceed? The papers were laid out again, new copies with fresh ink and correct figures. This time, Lord Ashford moved quickly, clearly wanting to finish before anything else could go wrong. Miss Caroline here. He thrust the pen at her sister with less ceremony than before. Caroline reached for it, hand shaking slightly. Actually, their mother interrupted, perhaps we should have Eliza witness the signatures first. She's legally of age and… Fine, Miss Eliza. Here. Lord Ashford shoved a separate document toward her. Witness signature and date as some… Eliza stood, relieved to have something to do besides sit in the corner radiating uselessness. She crossed to the desk, vaguely aware of Caroline giving her a grateful look. Having her older sister nearby probably felt like moral support. The paper Lord Ashford had indicated was dense with legal language. She scanned it automatically, her father's failed business ventures having at least taught her to read contracts. Witness declaration, standard language, nothing unusual. She signed, dated, stepped back. Excellent, Lord Ashford said, already gathering the papers. Now, Miss Caroline, wait. The Duke's voice stopped everyone mid-motion. What did she just sign? Lord Ashford blinked. The witness declaration, of course. Show me. It wasn't a request. Lord Ashford's face went through several interesting color changes before he handed over the paper Eliza had signed. The Duke read it, went very still, then looked at Eliza with an expression she couldn't decipher. This isn't a witness declaration, he said quietly. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Don't be absurd, Lord Ashford blustered. Of course it is. I specifically… This is the marriage contract itself. The Duke's voice could have cut glass, which means Miss Eliza Wren has just legally bound herself in marriage. To me. The words didn't make sense. Eliza heard them, understood each one individually, but together they formed a sentence from some other reality where logic didn't apply. That's impossible, her mother said faintly. I assure you it's not. The Duke held up the paper like evidence in a trial. The names have been filled in incorrectly. Where it should read Lord Richard Ashford and Miss Caroline Wren, it states Duke Adrian Blackthorne and Miss Eliza Wren. And she signed it. Eliza couldn't breathe. The room tilted sideways, then righted itself, then tilted again. There must be some mistake, her father was saying, his face gray. A clerical error, like before. The signature is witnessed. The Duke's tone was perfectly even, perfectly calm, like he was discussing the weather instead of Eliza's entire existence. The document is legally binding under current marriage law. As of this moment, Miss Eliza Wren is, technically, my wife. The word wife hit Eliza like a physical blow. This is outrageous! Lord Ashford had progressed from red to purple. Obviously, the wrong papers were included by accident. We'll simply void the contract and can't be done. But the Duke was still looking at Eliza. And she couldn't look away, couldn't move, couldn't think. A marriage contract, once signed by both parties and witnessed, cannot be voided without extensive legal proceedings. Annulment requires proof of fraud, coercion, or non-consummation, and would take months, possibly years. Then we'll begin proceedings immediately, her father said, trying for authority and achieving desperation. Clearly this is fraud, or at the very least, no. One word. The Duke said it quietly, but it silenced the entire room. No? Lord Ashford repeated, incredulous. No, the Duke said again. He folded the marriage contract precisely, tucked it into his jacket pocket. I see no reason to pursue annulment. Eliza's mother made a sound like a dying rabbit. Caroline grabbed the edge of the settee. Her father opened and closed his mouth several times without producing words. You can't be serious, Lord Ashford managed finally. She's not. This isn't. You can't possibly want. Want is irrelevant. The Duke's eyes were still locked on Eliza's, and she felt pinned in place, a butterfly on a collector's board. A contract has been signed. I honor my contracts. But Your Grace, her mother tried, voice high and thin, Eliza isn't suitable for. She's not prepared to be. I'm aware of what she is. Something sharp edged the Duke's words. The question is whether she's aware of what she's done. That snapped Eliza out of her paralysis. I signed what I was told to sign, she heard herself say, and her voice only shook a little. I didn't know. Ignorance isn't a legal defense. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. Though I suppose you could argue you were deceived. Is that what you're planning to argue, Miss Wren? It was a test. She could feel it, could see it in the way he watched her, waiting. No, she said. I signed it. Whatever that means, I signed it. Her mother gasped. Her father looked like he might faint. Even Caroline stared at her with wide, betrayed eyes. But the Duke almost smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Well then, he said, I believe congratulations are in order to the happy couple. The next 30 minutes dissolved into chaos Eliza couldn't fully track. Lord Ashford threatening legal action, her father trying to negotiate, her mother crying, Caroline silent and staring. The Duke standing motionless in the center of it all, like a rock in a stream, unmoved by the current battering against him. Through it all, one thing became increasingly clear. The Duke meant what he said. He wasn't going to void the contract, wasn't going to claim fraud or coercion or any of the dozens of legal escape routes that surely existed for a man of his power and wealth. He was going to keep her. The thought should have terrified her. Maybe it did, but underneath the fear was something else, something hot and rebellious that whispered, good. Let them see what happens when they shove the overlooked daughter into a corner and expect her to sign without reading. Finally, Lord Ashford stormed out, taking Lord Richard with him. The engagement that was supposed to save the Wren family had evaporated. Caroline's future had vanished. And it was Eliza's fault, even though she hadn't meant, even though she'd only been trying to help. I should go, the Duke said into the wreckage of her family's drawing room. I'll send my solicitor tomorrow to discuss the practicalities. Miss Wren, you'll move to Blackthorne House by week's end. Wait, Eliza said. Her voice surprised her. Just wait. He turned, raised one eyebrow. I don't understand. The words felt thick, heavy. You don't know me. You don't want this. So why am I honoring a contract I didn't intend to sign? His expression gave away nothing. Perhaps I'm curious. Or perhaps I simply don't like being told what I can and cannot do. Does the reason matter? Yes, she said. It matters to me. Then consider it a lesson, Miss Wren. He moved toward the door, then paused. You signed a paper without reading it carefully, assuming you understood what it was. That was foolish, but having signed it, you're accepting the consequences instead of trying to wriggle free. That's something. Something good or something bad. This time he definitely smiled. Ask me again in a year. Then he was gone, taking with him the last vestiges of Eliza's normal life. Her mother collapsed onto the settee, weeping. Her father stood frozen, staring at nothing. Caroline looked at Eliza like she'd grown a second head. Eliza, her sister said finally, voice small, what have you done? Eliza looked at her hands, still steady, somehow, despite everything. At the desk where she'd signed her life away. At the door through which a duke had just walked, carrying her future in his pocket like a receipt. I have absolutely no idea, she said, but she was about to find out. It's 3 days later, the Duke's townhouse in the city, he apparently had several residences because of course he did, was one of those places that made you feel poor just by looking at it. 4 stories of pale stone, windows that probably cost more than her family's entire house, and a front door that could double as a bank vault. Eliza stood on the pavement, her meager belongings in a single trunk beside her, and tried not to vomit. "Miss Wren?" The butler who'd answered the door was approximately 100 years old and looked at her like she was a stray cat someone had dragged in, which, to be fair, wasn't far from the truth. "Yes," she said. "I was told to—" The Duke said, "His Grace is expecting you, if you'll follow me." The interior of the house matched the exterior, expensive, cold, and designed to intimidate. Marble floors that echoed her footsteps. Paintings of stern-looking blackthorns glaring down from the walls. Furniture that probably had its own insurance policy. The butler led her through a maze of corridors to a study lined with books and dominated by an enormous mahogany desk. Behind the desk sat the Duke, reading what looked like a financial report and not bothering to look up when she entered. "Your Grace," the butler announced, "Miss Wren has arrived." "Thank you, Pemberton. That will be all." The butler vanished, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. The Duke finished whatever paragraph he was reading, made a notation in the margin, then finally raised his eyes to meet hers. "Miss Wren," he said, "punctual. I appreciate that." "I'm told I have many virtues," Eliza replied, surprising herself. "Punctuality, adequate needlework, the ability to remain silent for extended periods." His mouth twitched. Sarcasm wasn't mentioned. "I save that for special occasions." "I'm honored." He set down his pen with precise care. "Sit." It wasn't an invitation. Eliza sat. "We need to establish some ground rules, Kits," the Duke said. "I'm not a sentimental man, Miss Wren. I didn't choose you. You didn't choose me. But the contract exists, and I don't break contracts. So we're going to make this arrangement work." "An arrangement?" Eliza repeated. "That's what you're calling a marriage. That's what I'm calling a legal agreement between two parties who barely know each other." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You'll have rooms here, an allowance, access to whatever you need. In exchange, you'll be discreet, obedient, and cause me no embarrassment." Discreet. Obedient. The words tasted bitter. "What if I say no?" she asked. "To which part?" "All of it. What if I refuse to be your convenient, quiet, obedient wife? What if I cause you nothing but embarrassment?" The Duke was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, really smiled, sharp and dangerous, and Eliza realized she'd made a terrible mistake. "Then, Miss Wren," he said softly, "things are going to get very interesting." Outside, a clock struck 6. In the distance, church bells tolled, and Eliza Wren, who'd spent 23 years being overlooked, invisible, and forgotten, felt something ignite in her chest. If he wanted interesting, she'd give him interesting. If he thought she'd be obedient, he didn't know her at all. And if this arranged marriage was going to be her prison, she was damn well going to rattle the bars until something broke. Starting now. "Your Grace," she said, meeting his eyes and refusing to flinch. "I think you should know something." "What's that?" "I don't do obedient very well." His smile widened. "Good." Maddening. The rooms they'd given her were larger than her family's entire second floor. A bedroom with a 4-poster bed that could sleep 6. A sitting room with furniture that had probably cost more than her father's last business venture. A private bathroom with hot water and tiles imported from somewhere expensive. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and suffocating in equal measure. Eliza unpacked her trunk. It took approximately 10 minutes, because she didn't own much, and tried to figure out what happened next. The Duke had dismissed her after their conversation with instructions to settle in and join him for dinner at 8. No explanation of where dinner would be, no offer to show her around, just an expectation that she'd figure it out. Fine, she'd figure it out. She spent the next 2 hours exploring. The house was a maze of corridors and staircases, rooms that served no obvious purpose, and servants who looked at her with varying degrees of confusion and disdain. Apparently word had spread that the Duke had acquired a wife through some kind of paperwork accident, and none of them were impressed. Eliza couldn't blame them. She wasn't particularly impressed with herself either. At 5 minutes to 8, she found the dining room, mostly by following the smell of food and the sound of silverware being arranged with military precision. The Duke was already seated at the head of a table designed to host 20 people. He'd changed from his business clothes into evening wear that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. He looked like money and power and barely contained irritation. "You're late," he said without looking up from the wine glass he was examining. "I'm 3 minutes early." "Dinner is at 8. You should arrive at 7:55 to allow for seating and settling." "I'll update my etiquette manual," Eliza said, taking the chair at the opposite end of the table, approximately 15 feet of polished wood away from him. He looked up then, one eyebrow raised. "That's not your seat. You didn't specify which seat was mine. The seat closest to your husband would be traditional. Nothing about this situation is traditional, Your Grace." They stared at each other across the expanse of table. Eliza refused to be the first to look away. Finally, the Duke set down his wine glass. "Pemberton, Miss Wren will sit here." He indicated the chair to his immediate right. "Of course, Your Grace." Eliza considered refusing just to see what would happen, but she was hungry and the food smelled amazing, and picking battles with servants who were just following orders seemed petty. She moved to the indicated chair. Dinner was served. Multiple courses of things Eliza couldn't identify, prepared by a chef who clearly believed food should be art. It was delicious. She hated that it was delicious. They ate in silence for several minutes. The Duke focused on his meal with the same intense concentration he probably gave to financial reports. Eliza tried to figure out whether she was supposed to make conversation or if silence was the expected norm. "Tell me about yourself," the Duke said abruptly. "What would you like to know?" "Anything, everything. You're my wife. I should probably know more than your name." "My wife." The casual way he said it made something twist in Eliza's stomach. "I'm 23, Awesome," she said. "I like to read. I'm reasonably good at mathematics. I have opinions about most things. I'm told I'm argumentative. I've noticed. Is that a problem?" "I haven't decided yet." He carved into whatever meat was on his plate with surgical precision. "What do you like to read?" "Everything. Novels, philosophy, political theory." "Political theory?" "You sound surprised. Most women, if you finish that sentence with anything about what most women do or don't do, I'm leaving this table," Eliza interrupted. The Duke blinked. "All right. All right. All right, I won't make assumptions about what women are or aren't interested in." He took a sip of wine. "Though I am curious how you developed an interest in political theory. My father's library. He never read half the books he owned, so I did." Eliza pushed food around her plate. "I'm not particularly well educated in the formal sense, no governesses or finishing school, but I read everything I could find, and formed opinions." "Is that allowed?" "In this house?" The Duke considered. "Yes. Actually expressing those opinions may depend on the situation." "How convenient for you. I didn't say I'd always agree with them, but I'd rather a wife with opinions than one without thoughts in her head." "Really?" Eliza couldn't keep the skepticism out of her voice. "Because in that drawing room, you made it very clear you expected discreet and obedient." "I said I expected those things. I didn't say I wanted them." He met her eyes. "Do you know the difference, Miss Wren?" "Eliza." "What?" "If I'm your wife, you should probably call me by my first name." She felt her cheeks heat. "Or is that not done in whatever world you live in?" Something shifted in his expression, softened almost. "Eliza, then, and you should call me Adrian." "Should I?" "If you'd like." She wouldn't like. Using his first name felt too intimate, too real, but refusing felt childish. "Adrian," she said, testing it. The name felt strange in her mouth. He nodded, like she'd passed some test. "Now, tell me about your family." So she did. Told him about her father's failed business ventures, her mother's desperate social climbing, Caroline's beauty and the engagement that had vanished because of Eliza's mistake. She expected judgment, maybe pity. Instead, Adrian just listened. "You blame yourself," he said when she finished. "Of course I do. Caroline would have been married by now if I hadn't." If Lord Ashford's office hadn't prepared the wrong documents, you mean? Adrian refilled her wine glass without asking if she wanted more. If his solicitor hadn't been incompetent, if your father had bothered to verify what you were signing before pushing you toward the desk, the error wasn't yours alone. But I'm the one who signed what you were told to sign by your family in a room full of people watching. Yes, his voice was steady. You made a mistake. So did everyone else in that room, but you're the only one dealing with the consequences. Eliza stared at him. Why aren't you angry? Who says I'm not? You don't seem angry at you? No. He set down his fork with careful precision. Angry at the situation? Moderately, but anger isn't useful. What's done is done. Now we deal with it. By making me your convenient, obedient wife. I never said convenient. The corner of his mouth twitched, and I'm beginning to suspect obedient is beyond both of our capabilities. Despite everything, the absurdity, the fear, the complete upheaval of her life, Eliza almost laughed. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Ice and iron. That's what people say about you. People say a lot of things. Adrian pushed back from the table. Most of them are designed to avoid the complexity of actual human beings. I'm difficult and controlling and probably too focused on work, but I'm not ice. What are you then? He looked at her for a long moment. Ask me again when you know me better. Then he excused himself, leaving Eliza alone in a dining room large enough to echo, surrounded by the remains of a meal she'd barely tasted, wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into, and wondering just a little if maybe, possibly, it might not be entirely terrible. The first week at Blackthorne House taught Eliza 3 things. The servants hated her, society thought she was a joke, and Adrian's idea of marriage involved seeing each other approximately twice a day for meals conducted in near silence. It was, in short, exactly as suffocating as she'd feared. The servants were the worst part. Not openly hostile, they were too well trained for that, but their disdain leaked through in 1,000 tiny ways. The way they took just a beat too long to answer when she called, the cold tea that arrived in her room each morning, the misplaced correspondence, the whispered conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room. Mrs. Hartwell, the housekeeper, was the ringleader. A woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and a spine that could double as a ruler, she looked at Eliza like something unpleasant the cat had dragged in. His Grace prefers his breakfast at 7 precisely. Mrs. Hartwell informed her on the 3rd morning, standing in the doorway of Eliza's room with her hands folded. You'll want to be dressed and presentable by 6:45. I'll keep that in mind, Eliza said from her position at the writing desk, where she'd been attempting to compose a letter to Caroline, attempting being the key word. What did you say to a sister whose future you'd accidentally destroyed? And His Grace expects the household accounts reviewed weekly. I assume you'll want to familiarize yourself with the ledgers. I would, actually. Mrs. Hartwell blinked. You would? Yes. When can I see them? Well, that's highly irregular. The previous... She stopped herself, mouth compressing into a thin line. I'll have to consult with His Grace. Please do. Eliza turned back to her letter. I'm very interested in how the household is run. The housekeeper left in a swirl of disapproval. Eliza abandoned the letter she'd been staring at Dear Caroline for 20 minutes anyway and moved to the window. Below, the city sprawled in all its grimy, beautiful chaos. Carriages and street vendors and people who had places to be, purposes to fulfill. She was trapped in a mansion with people who despised her, married to a man who barely spoke to her, and expected to just... what? Exist quietly? Fade into the wallpaper? The rage that had been simmering since the wedding, if you could call a brief cold ceremony in a magistrate's office a wedding, flared hot. No. She hadn't signed that contract to become invisible in a different house. If Adrian wanted a wife, he was going to get one, just not the kind he expected. She found him that afternoon in his study, surrounded by ledgers and correspondence. He didn't look up when she entered. I want access to the household accounts, Eliza announced. Adrian's pen paused mid-word. Good afternoon to you too. Good afternoon. I want access to the household accounts. He set down the pen with deliberate care. Why? Because I'm the lady of this house, theoretically. and I should understand how it's run. Mrs. Hartwell manages the household quite capably. I'm sure she does. I'd still like to see the books. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unreadable expression she was starting to hate. You think there's something wrong with how the house is managed? It wasn't a question. I think I'd like to understand where the money goes, Eliza said carefully. I'm good with numbers. You said you appreciated that about me. I said you mentioned being reasonably good at mathematics. That's not the same as… What? Being capable of addition? Reading a ledger? I managed my father's household accounts for 3 years after our steward quit. She crossed her arms. I know you don't trust me. I know everyone in this house thinks I'm an incompetent fool who trapped you into marriage. But if I'm going to be here, I'm going to be useful. So either give me access to the accounts or find me something else to do, because I am not going to sit in my room embroidering cushions while everyone whispers about me. The silence stretched long enough that Eliza started to regret the outburst. Then Adrian did something unexpected. He laughed. Not much, just a short, sharp sound, but it transformed his face, made him look younger, almost human. All right, he said. All right? You can review the accounts. Mrs. Hartwell will be thrilled. His mouth twitched. Fair warning, she's going to make your life hell. She already is. Then I suppose it can't get worse. He pulled out a drawer, extracted a key, and held it out. The household ledgers are in the library, locked cabinet on the east wall. Don't lose this. Eliza took the key, their fingers brushing briefly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might regret asking. But something in his eyes suggested he was pleased, or at least amused. She'd take amused over indifferent. The household ledgers were a mess. Not obviously. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Neat columns, balanced totals, every penny accounted for. But Eliza had learned to read between the lines during her father's financial decline, and she knew the difference between honest bookkeeping and creative accounting. She spent 2 days locked in the library, cross-referencing entries, comparing supplier invoices to expenditure records, tracking patterns. And slowly, a picture emerged. Someone was stealing from Adrian. Small amounts, never enough to be immediately obvious, but consistent. £5 here for household repairs that had never been made. £10 there for staff provisions that didn't match the actual supplier receipts. £20 for emergency expenses with no documentation. Over the course of a year, it added up to several £100s, maybe more. Eliza sat back, staring at the evidence spread across the library table. This was bad. This was going to cause an explosion when Adrian found out. But he needed to know. She gathered her documentation and went to find him. He was in the drawing room, entertaining guests. Eliza heard the voices before she reached the door. Adrian's low and controlled, another man's booming and jovial, and a woman's high laugh that set her teeth on edge. She should wait, come back later. This wasn't the time. But if she waited, she'd lose her nerve. And the anger at being stolen from, at the servant's disdain, at everything, was propelling her forward. Eliza pushed open the drawing room door. 3 faces turned toward her. Adrian, still in his shirt sleeves, a drink in hand. A portly man with elaborate whiskers seated in the best chair. And a woman who made Caroline look plain, all dark hair and perfect features, and a dress that probably cost more than Eliza's entire wardrobe. I'm sorry to interrupt, Eliza said, though she wasn't. Adrian, I need to speak with you. The woman's eyebrows rose. The portly man looked amused. Adrian's expression gave away nothing. Can it wait? He asked, voice carefully neutral. No. The woman made a small sound of shock. How rude. It's fine, Lady Victoria. Adrian set down his drink. Lord Pemberton, if you'll excuse me for a moment. Of course, of course. Lord Pemberton's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Take your time, my boy. Adrian moved toward her, and Eliza realized too late how this looked, her barging in, demanding his attention, interrupting his afternoon. But it was too late to retreat now. He followed her into the corridor, pulling the door shut behind him. This had better be important, he said quietly. Someone's stealing from you. That got his attention. His eyes sharpened. What? Eliza thrust the papers at him. The household accounts. There are discrepancies, regular patterned discrepancies. Someone's been skimming money for at least a year, probably longer. Adrian took the documentation, scanning it quickly. His jaw tightened. How much? Hundreds of pounds, conservatively. Maybe more if it goes back further than these ledgers cover. Who? I don't know yet. The false entries are spread across different categories, different apparent purposes. It's sophisticated enough that it could be one person covering their tracks or multiple people working together. Adrian's face had gone cold, that ice and iron everyone talked about, except now Eliza could see it was controlled fury rather than indifference. You're certain? Yes, I triple-checked the math. He stared at the papers for a long moment, then looked at her. Why? Why what? Why did you do this? You could have ignored it. Let it be someone else's problem. Because it's wrong, Eliza said simply, and because you gave me access to the accounts. I wasn't going to waste that. Something shifted in his expression. Thank you. You're welcome. Now what are you going to do about it? Investigate. Quietly. He folded the papers with precise care. If word gets out that I'm looking into the household finances, whoever's behind this will cover their tracks. I need to... Let me help. Say, absolutely not. Why not? I found it. I can... Which makes you a target. Adrian's voice was flat. If someone realizes you've discovered the theft, they'll see you as a threat. I'm not putting you in that position. I'm already in that position. Everyone in this house hates me anyway. At least if I'm investigating, I'll have a reason for them to hate me. Eliza, Adrian, I'm going insane sitting in my room reading novels and being served cold tea by people who wish I didn't exist. Please, let me do something useful. He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You're not going to let this go. No. And if I order you to stay out of it, I'll ignore you and investigate anyway, just less efficiently because you won't be sharing information with me. His mouth twitched despite the gravity of the situation. You really don't do obedient, do you? I warned you. Yes, you did. He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect arrangement. All right. But we do this carefully. No confrontations, no accusations, just observation and documentation. Agreed? Agreed. And if at any point I think you're in danger, you stop immediately. That's not... Those are my terms. His eyes were steel. Take them, or I do this alone. Eliza wanted to argue, but the set of his jaw told her this wasn't negotiable. Fine. Agreed. Good. He glanced back at the drawing room door. I need to get back to my guests. Can you start documenting patterns? Who had access to what when the discrepancies started? Anything that might point to specific individuals? Yes. Who are they anyway? Eliza nodded toward the drawing room. Your guests. Lord Pemberton is a business associate. Lady Victoria is, he paused, an old friend. Something in his tone suggested friend was a complicated word. Eliza told herself she didn't care, except she did care, a little, and that was annoying. She's beautiful, Eliza said, aiming for casual and hitting somewhere near bitter. Yes. Is she... Were you? My personal history isn't relevant to the household theft. But Adrian's voice had softened slightly. Victoria and I knew each other before. It didn't work out. She married someone else. He died. Now she's a widow, and we're cordial. 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 And she just happened to visit today. She visits regularly. Adrian met her eyes, as do several other friends and business associates. You're welcome to join us if you'd like. You are my wife. In name only, Eliza didn't say, I should get back to the ledgers. Eliza. But she was already walking away, clutching her documentation, trying to ignore the hot, ugly feeling in her chest that felt suspiciously like jealousy. She had no right to be jealous. This was a marriage of accident, not choice. Adrian could entertain whoever he wanted, could have whatever history with beautiful widows he chose. It didn't matter to her, except it did. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. The investigation consumed the next week, Eliza threw herself into it with desperate focus, grateful for something to think about besides Lady Victoria's perfect laugh and the way Adrian's expression had softened when he said her name. She cataloged every suspicious entry in the household accounts going back 3 years, cross-referenced staff schedules against the dates of the discrepancies, interviewed the kitchen staff about supplier deliveries, disguising it as interest in learning the household routines. Gradually, a pattern emerged. The thefts always happened during the first week of each month, always involved categories overseen by Mrs. Hartwell, and always coincided with times when Adrian was away on business. Mrs. Hartwell, the housekeeper who'd been with the Blackthorne family for 15 years, who ran the household with ruthless efficiency, who looked at Eliza like she was dirt. "It's her," Eliza told Adrian one evening after dinner. They'd started meeting in the library each night to discuss the investigation, the only time they spent together outside of meals. "I can't prove it yet, but all the evidence points to Mrs. Hartwell." Adrian sat behind the library desk, her documentation spread before him. He looked tired, more tired than she'd seen him. "Are you certain?" "No. That's why I said I can't prove it yet." Eliza paced the length of the room. "But the pattern is clear. She's the one with access to those budget categories. She's the one who approves the expenditures. And she's been here long enough to know your schedule, to know when you're not paying attention. She's been with my family since I was a boy, which makes her trusted, which makes it easier to steal." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "If you're right, if we accuse her and you're wrong, then I look like a vindictive wife trying to get rid of staff who don't like me." "I know." Eliza stopped pacing, faced him. "But what if I'm right and we do nothing? Then she keeps stealing." "Exactly." Adrian rubbed his eyes. "We need proof. Something concrete, not just patterns and suspicions. So we set a trap." "What kind of trap?" Eliza had been thinking about this for 2 days. "You tell Mrs. Hartwell you're going away on business for a week. Make it convincing. Have correspondence delivered. Tell other staff. Make sure she believes it. Then you stay here, hidden, and we watch what she does." "That could take weeks." "So? Do you have a better idea?" He didn't, but he didn't look happy about it either. "This could be dangerous," he said finally. "If she realizes we're watching, I'll be careful." "Eliza, Adrian, I'm not fragile. I can handle this." He looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "I'm beginning to believe that." The trap was set 3 days later. Adrian made a great show of preparing for a business trip to the northern properties. Trunks packed, travel plans discussed with various staff members, farewell instructions given to Mrs. Hartwell about managing the household in his absence. Then he left in his carriage at dawn and returned through the servants' entrance at midnight, smuggled in by Pemberton, the ancient butler who'd served the Blackthornes since before Adrian was born, and who was apparently one of the few people in the household Adrian trusted absolutely. "This is madness," Pemberton muttered, leading them through the darkened corridors to a small storage room adjacent to Mrs. Hartwell's office. "If she catches us, she won't." Adrian's voice was low. "Thank you, Pemberton. That will be all." The butler vanished into the shadows. Adrian tested the storage room's narrow door. It opened silently, providing a clear view into Mrs. Hartwell's office through a crack in the hinges. Someone had done excellent carpentry work decades ago, creating what was essentially a spy hole. "How did you know about this?" Eliza whispered. "I used to hide here as a child when I was avoiding my tutors." Adrian's mouth quirked. "Never thought I'd use it for surveillance." They settled in to wait. The storage room was cramped, barely enough space for both of them, which meant Eliza was pressed against Adrian's side, acutely aware of his warmth, his breathing, the faint scent of whatever soap he used. This was a terrible idea. Not the surveillance, that was necessary, but being this close to him, in the dark, with nothing to do but wait and think and feel. "Tell me about your father," Adrian said quietly. Eliza blinked. "What?" "Your father. The failed business ventures. What happened?" "Why do you want to know?" "Because we're going to be here for hours, possibly, and I'd rather talk than sit in silence." He shifted slightly. "And because I realized I know almost nothing about you beyond what you've told me, and that seems like something I should correct. So Eliza told him about her father's shipping business, how he'd been so certain the new trade routes would pay off, how he'd invested everything and lost it all when the merchant ships sank in a storm, about the desperate years that followed trying to maintain appearances while selling off furniture piece by piece, about her mother's increasing hysteria, Caroline's pressure to marry well, the weight of family expectations crushing down on all of them. "Is that why you didn't fight harder?" Adrian asked. "When you realized what you'd signed?" "What do you mean?" "You could have screamed fraud, claimed coercion, made my life hell until I agreed to an annulment." His voice was thoughtful. "Instead, you just accepted it." "I signed it," Eliza said simply. Fighting it seemed dishonest. Honest to a fault. Is that a compliment or a criticism? "I haven't decided yet." They fell silent. In Mrs. Hartwell's office, nothing stirred. The house was deeply quiet, that particular 3 a.m. silence when even the mice were asleep. "Can I ask you something?" Eliza said finally. "Yes." "Lady Victoria, were you in love with her?" She felt Adrian tense beside her. "Why does that matter?" "It doesn't. I'm just curious." "Curious." "Yes. Is that not allowed?" "It's allowed. I'm just trying to figure out why you're asking." "Because everyone acts like you don't have feelings," Eliza said. "Ice and iron, remember? But you must have felt something for her. She's beautiful and elegant and everything I'm not—" "Stop." The word cut through the darkness like a blade. Eliza froze. "Don't do that," Adrian said, voice tight. "Don't compare yourself to her like you're somehow less." "I didn't mean—" "Yes, I cared for Victoria, years ago. When we were both younger and stupider. She wanted a title and money. I wanted—" He stopped. "It doesn't matter what I wanted. She married someone who could give her what she needed, and I learned that caring for someone doesn't mean they'll choose you." The pain in his voice was raw enough that Eliza's breath caught. "Adrian? So yes, I have feelings. I'm just careful about who I show them to." He shifted, putting fractional distance between them. "Does that answer your question?" "Yes," Eliza whispered. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For asking. For—" "Don't apologize for curiosity." His voice softened slightly. "I'd rather you ask than wonder." They sat in silence after that, but it felt different, less strained, like something had shifted between them, some wall lowered just enough to see over. Hours passed. 4 a.m. became 5, became 6. Eliza's legs were cramping and her back ached, and she was beginning to think this whole plan was— A light flared in Mrs. Hartwell's office. They both froze. Through the crack in the door, Eliza could see the housekeeper, fully dressed despite the early hour, lighting a lamp with hands that moved with practiced efficiency. Mrs. Hartwell moved to her desk, pulled out a drawer with a key from her pocket, and extracted a leather-bound ledger. Not the household accounts. Something else. Adrian's hand found Eliza's in the darkness, squeezed once. She squeezed back, barely breathing. Mrs. Hartwell opened the secret ledger, made several entries with quick, precise penmanship, then closed it and locked it back in the drawer. But not before Eliza glimpsed columns of numbers, amounts that matched exactly the discrepancies she'd found in the household accounts. Proof. They had proof. Mrs. Hartwell extinguished the lamp, left the office. Her footsteps faded down the corridor. Adrian waited 5 minutes. Eliza counted them in her racing heartbeat, before easing the storage room door open. "Stay here," he whispered. "Like hell. Eliza, if she comes back, then you'll need a witness. I'm coming." They moved into Mrs. Hartwell's office together. Adrian pulled out the same set of lockpicks he'd used to open the storage room door. Apparently Dukes learned useful skills, and had the desk drawer open in seconds. The secret ledger confirmed everything. Years of theft, meticulously recorded. Amounts, dates, false justifications. Mrs. Hartwell had kept her own parallel accounting system, probably as insurance or simple arrogance. "She's been stealing for 5 years, Adrian said, voice cold with fury. "At least 1,500 pounds, possibly more." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done years ago, audit the household properly." He closed the ledger, locked the drawer. But not yet. "If she knows we found this—" A footstep in the corridor. They both froze. The The footstep came closer, stopped outside the office door. Adrian grabbed Eliza's hand, pulled her toward the storage room, but they were too slow. The door was opening. Someone was coming in. Mrs. Hartwell stood in the doorway, a candle in hand, staring at them. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Mrs. Hartwell's face transformed from shock to cold calculation. "Your Grace, I wasn't expecting you back." "Clearly." Adrian's voice could have cut stone. "And Miss Eliza, how industrious." The housekeeper's eyes flicked to the desk, the locked drawer. Understanding dawned. "I see. You've been stealing from me," Adrian said flatly. "For years. Stealing is such an ugly word." Mrs. Hartwell set down her candle with perfect composure. "I prefer to think of it as compensation for services rendered. You have no idea how much work goes into running this household, Your Grace. How many problems I solve before they reach your attention. Surely that deserves appropriate remuneration." Appropriate remuneration is called a salary, which you receive. A salary that hasn't increased in 7 years, despite my increased responsibilities. Her voice hardened. "While you spend money on business ventures and expensive wine and entertaining your society friends, I think a small percentage of the household budget is more than fair." "It's theft," Eliza said. "No matter how you justify it." Mrs. Hartwell's eyes snapped to her, full of venom. "This is your fault. If you hadn't come here, hadn't started poking around where you don't belong, if I hadn't noticed you were stealing, you mean. You arrogant little—" Mrs. Hartwell took a step forward, and suddenly there was something dangerous in the air, something that made Eliza's instincts scream. Adrian moved between them instantly. "That's enough." "Is it?" Mrs. Hartwell's composure was cracking. "You're going to dismiss me, ruin my reputation, after 15 years of loyal service." "Loyal service doesn't include embezzlement." "Then what choice do I have?" The housekeeper's hand moved to her apron pocket, emerged holding something that glinted in the candlelight. A knife. Small, sharp, the kind used for household tasks. Adrian went very still. "Put that down." "So you can call the constables? Have me arrested?" Mrs. Hartwell laughed, high and brittle. "I don't think so. You're making this worse. It can't get worse. You've already decided I'm guilty. Already ruined me." Her eyes fixed on Eliza. "Because of her, the accidental duchess, the nobody who trapped you into marriage." "Leave her out of this," Adrian said, voice low and dangerous. "Why?" "She's the reason you even looked at the accounts. She's the reason—" Mrs. Hartwell lunged, not at Adrian, at Eliza. The knife flashed up. Eliza stumbled backward, hit the desk, had nowhere to go. Adrian grabbed Mrs. Hartwell's wrist mid-strike, twisted. The knife clattered to the floor. The housekeeper screamed, furious and desperate, trying to wrench free. "Get out," Adrian told Eliza. His voice was absolutely calm. "Get Pemberton. Tell him to bring footmen." Eliza ran. By the time she returned with Pemberton and 2 burly footmen, Adrian had Mrs. Hartwell restrained in a chair, her hands bound with curtain cord. The housekeeper was crying now, all her composure shattered, muttering about unfairness and betrayal and how she'd given her life to this family. "Take her to the servants' quarters," Adrian told the footman. "Lock the door. Tomorrow I'll contact the constables." They hauled Mrs. Hartwell away, still sobbing. Pemberton bowed and followed, looking shaken, leaving Adrian and Eliza alone in the wrecked office. "Are you hurt?" Adrian asked immediately, turning to her. "No, I'm fine. You?" "Fine." But his hands were shaking slightly as he bent to retrieve the knife from where it had fallen. "That was terrifying? I was going to say close." He looked at her. "Too close. She could have, if I hadn't. But you did." Eliza's own hands were trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. "You stopped her. I should never have let you get involved in the first place. I should have—" "Adrian." Eliza crossed to him, put her hand over his. "I chose to help. This isn't your fault." He stared at their joined hands. "She tried to kill you." "She tried to kill the investigation. I was just in the way. That doesn't make it better." His fingers tightened around hers. "I brought you into this house, into this situation. I'm responsible for your safety. I'm responsible for my own safety, and I'm fine. We're both fine. Adrian lifted his eyes to hers. In the candlelight, they looked almost vulnerable, almost afraid. When I saw that knife coming at you, he said quietly, He stopped, swallowed, didn't finish the sentence, but Eliza heard what he didn't say. Felt it in the way he was still holding her hand like he was afraid she'd disappear. We should get some sleep, she said softly. It's almost dawn. Yes, but he didn't move, didn't let go. Adrian, I'm glad you're all right, he said finally. I needed to say that. Then he released her hand, stepped back, and the moment shattered. But as Eliza made her way through the lightning corridors back to her room, she couldn't stop thinking about the fear in his voice, the way he'd moved between her and danger without hesitation, the way he'd held her hand like it mattered, like she mattered, and the terrifying realization that somewhere in the past few weeks, this accidental marriage had started to feel like something real. Sleep didn't come. Eliza lay in her massive bed watching dawn bleed across the ceiling, replaying the moment the knife had flashed toward her, the cold certainty in Mrs. Hartwell's eyes, the sound of Adrian's voice, get out, stripped of all its usual control, the way he'd looked at her after, like he was cataloging injuries, like he was afraid. She gave up on sleep around 7 and dressed herself. Still couldn't quite bring herself to ring for a maid, not after everything. The house felt different in the morning light, quieter, like it was holding its breath. The breakfast room was empty except for Adrian, who looked like he hadn't slept either. He stood at the window, coffee cup in hand, staring at nothing. "You're up early," he said without turning. "Couldn't sleep." "Neither could I." He took a long drink of coffee. "The constables will be here at 9. They'll want to speak with you, with both of us." "All right. You don't have to be involved in the prosecution if you don't want to be. I can handle—" "Adrian." Eliza moved to stand beside him. "I found the theft. I helped set the trap. I'm not going to hide now." He looked at her then, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "She tried to kill you." "I know." "And you're not afraid?" "Terrified," Eliza admitted. "But fear isn't a reason to stop." His mouth quirked despite everything. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both?" That got an actual smile. Small, but real. "I suppose it can." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city wake up below. Then Adrian spoke again, quieter. "I underestimated you." Eliza blinked. "What?" "When this started, when you signed that contract, I thought you were just another society girl. Pretty enough, probably useless, definitely going to be a problem." He set down his coffee cup. "I was wrong." "Pretty enough?" Eliza repeated, focusing on the least important part because the rest made her chest feel too tight. "You know what I mean." "Do I?" Adrian turned to face her fully. "You're not what I expected. You're smarter than most men I do business with. You're stubborn as hell. You don't back down even when you should. And last night," he stopped. "Last night you could have panicked, could have frozen. Instead you ran for help and came back with it. That takes common sense? Courage." The word hung between them. Eliza didn't know what to do with it, with the way he was looking at her, like she was something other than an accident he'd gotten stuck with. "I just did what needed to be done," she said finally. "Exactly." Adrian held her gaze. "That's what I'm talking about." Before Eliza could figure out how to respond to that, Pemberton appeared in the doorway. "Your Grace, Lord Ramsay is here to see you. He says it's urgent." Adrian frowned. "Ramsay? At this hour?" "He's in the entrance hall. He seems quite agitated. Show him to my study. I'll be there shortly." Adrian looked at Eliza. "You should probably— I'm coming with you." "Eliza, if it's about last night, I should hear it. If it's not, I'm curious." She crossed her arms. "And before you argue, remember how well that usually works." Adrian sighed. "Fine, but let me do the talking." Lord Ramsay was a tall, angular man with the kind of face that looked perpetually suspicious. He was pacing Adrian's study when they entered, and he stopped mid-stride when he saw Eliza. Blackthorne, I need to speak with you privately. My wife stays, Adrian said, moving behind his desk. What's this about? Your wife is precisely what this is about. Ramsey's eyes flicked to Eliza with something like distaste. The scandal is spreading. People are talking. People are always talking. Not like this. Ramsey pulled a folded newspaper from his coat, slapped it on the desk. Have you seen the morning papers? Adrian picked up the paper, scanned it. His jaw tightened. What is it? Eliza asked. An editorial. Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. About our marriage. Let me see. He hesitated, then handed her the paper. The headline made her stomach drop. The Accidental Duchess. How an unknown nobody trapped one of England's most powerful men. The article was worse. Speculation presented as fact. Insinuations about Eliza's character. Suggestions that she deliberately orchestrated the contract switch to ensnare Adrian. Questions about whether the marriage was even legal. And worst of all, quotes from unnamed sources claiming the Duke had been coerced into honoring the contract to avoid scandal. This is... Eliza's hands shook. This is all lies. It's character assassination, Adrian corrected, which is slightly different. How can they print this? Because they're not technically claiming anything provable. It's all innuendo and anonymous sources. Adrian took the paper back, tossed it on his desk like something contaminated. Ramsey, where did this come from? Does it matter? It's everywhere. Every club, every drawing room. People are laughing at you, Blackthorne, saying you've gone soft, that you let yourself be manipulated by a girl with nothing but average looks and opportunistic parents. Each word landed like a slap. Eliza kept her face carefully blank, but inside she was burning. That's enough, Adrian said quietly. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, this marriage is destroying your reputation. The business partners are getting nervous, the investors are asking questions, and your friends... Ramsey's voice turned almost sympathetic. Your friends are wondering what hold she has over you. She has no hold over me. Then end it. Get the annulment. Claim fraud. Everyone will believe it after this article. Cut your losses before this gets worse. I said no. Adrian, I said no. Adrian's voice could have frozen fire. The marriage stands. My reputation will survive. And if my so-called friends can't handle that, they were never friends to begin with. Ramsey stared at him. You're serious. Completely. Even though staying married to her will cost you, socially, professionally, politically? Even then. Why? The question came out almost bewildered. She's nothing. A nobody from a failing family with no connections, no beauty, no value. Adrian was around the desk before Ramsey finished the sentence. He didn't touch the other man, but his presence was enough to make Ramsey take a step back. Get out of my house, Adrian said, voice soft and deadly. And if I hear you speaking about my wife like that again, you'll find yourself on the wrong side of every business deal in this city. Are we clear? Ramsey's face had gone red. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. Get out. Ramsey left, practically vibrating with indignation. The study door slammed behind him. Adrian stood very still for a moment. Then he turned to Eliza. Are you all right? Are you? Eliza's voice came out steadier than she felt. He's right, you know. This marriage is costing you. I don't care. You should care. Your reputation, your business, can survive one newspaper article and some gossip. Adrian moved back to his desk, but he didn't sit. You think I haven't dealt with worse? Not because of me. Not because of you. About you. There's a difference. Is there? Eliza gestured at the newspaper. They're calling me an opportunistic nobody, saying I trapped you. And they're not entirely wrong, are they? I did trap you, even if it was an accident. Stop. Adrian's voice cut through her spiral. You signed a paper you were told to sign in a room full of people watching. That's not trapping someone. That's making a mistake. We all made mistakes that day. But I'm the one paying for it. We're both paying for it. He held her gaze. But I'd rather pay this price than void the contract and prove to everyone that I'm the kind of man who abandons obligations when they become inconvenient. This isn't about obligation. No, Adrian agreed. It's not. Not anymore. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Eliza didn't quite dare examine. "What are we going to do?" she asked finally. "About the newspaper?" "Nothing. Responding gives it credibility." Adrian's expression hardened. But I'm going to find out who fed them the story. Anonymous sources aren't as anonymous as journalists like to pretend. You think someone we know? I think someone wanted to cause exactly this kind of damage. The question is who and why. He picked up the newspaper again, studying it. The timing is interesting, right after the situation with Mrs. Hartwell. You think she had time to send a letter before we caught her? Possibly, or someone else in the household who wasn't happy about the investigation. Adrian set down the paper. Either way, we have enemies, plural, which means we need to be careful. Careful how? You don't go anywhere alone. You don't trust anyone we haven't vetted. And if anything seems suspicious, I tell you immediately, I understand. Eliza crossed her arms. Though I'm not sure hiding in the house is going to help our reputation. What do you suggest? We go out, together, show society we're united. The idea crystallized as she spoke. There's the Hendersons' ball tomorrow night. Everyone will be there. Everyone will have read that article. So your solution is to walk into a room full of people who think you're an opportunistic fraud? Yes. Adrian stared at her. You're insane. Probably, but I'm also right. Eliza met his eyes. Hiding makes us look guilty. Going out, facing them, shows we have nothing to be ashamed of. You realize they'll tear you apart. Let them try. Something sparked in Adrian's expression. Approval, maybe, or interest. You really don't back down, do you? Not when I'm right. And you're always right. Frequently enough to be dangerous. Adrian's mouth twitched. All right, we'll go to the ball, but on one condition. What condition? You wear something that makes every woman in that ballroom jealous and every man in it regret that I saw you first. Eliza felt her cheeks heat. I don't have anything like that. Then we'll get you something. Adrian moved toward the door. I'll send for a modiste. Consider it an early wedding gift. We're already married. Technically married, he corrected. We never had a proper wedding, or a wedding night, or... He stopped, seemed to realize what he was saying. The dress. I'll arrange for the dress. Then he was gone, leaving Eliza alone with the newspaper article and the strange, fluttering feeling in her chest that felt dangerously like hope. The modiste arrived that afternoon with enough fabric samples to clothe a small army. Madame Cécile was a tiny, fierce woman who took one look at Eliza and declared that she had excellent bones but terrible posture. Stand up straight, she commanded. How can I dress you properly if you insist on slouching like a guilty schoolgirl? I'm not slouching. You are. Stop it. Madame Cécile circled her like a hawk examining prey. His Grace wants you to look magnificent, yes? Then we make you magnificent, even if you fight me the entire time. I'm not fighting. Good. Then take off that dress. I need to see what I'm working with. 2 hours and approximately 700 pins later, Eliza stood in front of the mirror in her room and didn't recognize herself. The dress was deep emerald green, cut in a style she'd never worn, low across the shoulders, fitted through the waist, with a skirt that moved like water when she walked. It made her skin look luminous instead of pale, made her eyes look dramatic instead of ordinary, made her look like someone who belonged at a duke's side. You see? Madame Cécile said with satisfaction. I told you, magnificent. It's too much, Eliza said weakly. Nonsense, it's exactly enough. The modiste gathered her things. His Grace has excellent taste. He knew what you needed. After Madame Cécile left, Eliza stood in front of the mirror for a long time, trying to reconcile the woman in the reflection with the overlooked daughter who'd accidentally signed her life away 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. It felt like years, like a different life entirely. A knock at the door made her turn. Come in. Adrian entered, stopped short when he saw her. Something flashed across his face. Surprise, appreciation, something that made Eliza's breath catch. That's... He cleared his throat. That's perfect. Madame Cécile is a miracle worker. She had excellent material to work with. Adrian moved closer, studying her. You look like I belong in this life? Like you. He met her eyes. Just more so. Eliza didn't know what to say to that. Fortunately, Adrian seemed equally at a loss for words. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before he pulled an envelope from his jacket. The constables came earlier. Mrs. Hartwell gave a full confession. She'll be prosecuted. He handed Eliza the envelope. And this was in today's Post. For you. Eliza recognized her sister's handwriting. She opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Eliza, I know you won't want to hear from me. I know I should have written sooner, but I've been so angry and hurt and confused. Mother says you ruined everything, that you were careless and selfish and destroyed our family's one chance at salvation. I don't believe that anymore. I've had time to think, to realize that you were trying to help that day, that you've always been trying to help, even when no one noticed, even when we took you for granted. Lord Richard's family did want to salvage the engagement after all the scandal died down. They offered. And I said no. I don't want to marry someone who sees me as a transaction. Who cares more about dowries than about who I actually am? You showed me that's possible, to refuse the easy path, to choose something harder but more honest. I don't know if your marriage is happy. I hope it is. But even if it isn't, thank you for showing me I don't have to accept whatever scraps society offers me. I miss you. Mother forbids me from visiting, but perhaps you could write? Your sister. Caroline Eliza read the letter twice, tears blurring the words. Adrian stood quietly, letting her process. She's not angry at me, Eliza said finally. Should she be? I thought I destroyed her engagement, her future. You destroyed one option. Apparently she's finding better ones. Adrian's voice was gentle. Families are complicated. Give her time. Did you have siblings? Eliza asked suddenly. A brother. He died when I was 12. Adrian's expression shuddered. Writing accident. After that, it was just me, and my father made very sure I understood what that meant. That you were alone? That I was responsible for the family name, the business, the legacy, that I couldn't afford mistakes or weakness or... He stopped. I'm not sure why I'm telling you this. Because I asked, Eliza said softly. And because maybe you're tired of carrying everything by yourself. He looked at her for a long moment. Maybe I am. The Henderson ball was exactly as terrible as Eliza had feared. The moment they entered the ballroom, conversation stopped. Every head turned, every eye locked on them with varying degrees of shock, curiosity, and barely concealed malice. Lady Henderson recovered first, sweeping forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Your Grace and the new Duchess, what a surprise to see you. Lady Henderson, Adrian's voice was perfectly pleasant. Thank you for the invitation. Of course, though I must admit I wasn't certain you'd come. Given the circumstances. Her gaze raked over Eliza. But here you are. Here we are, Eliza agreed, lifting her chin. The ballroom felt like a gauntlet. Everywhere they moved, people watched, whispered, ladies behind fans, gentlemen behind brandy glasses, all of them judging, finding her wanting. Ignore them, Adrian murmured, his hand warm against her back. They're not worth your time. Easy for you to say. They're not calling you a manipulative fraud in the morning papers. No, they're calling me weak and controlled. I'm not sure which is worse. Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. At least we're suffering together. There's that. Adrian guided her toward the refreshment table. Drink? Please, like something strong. He was reaching for champagne when Lady Victoria materialized beside them like a particularly beautiful ghost. Adrian, how brave of you to come. Her smile was all sympathy and poison. After that dreadful article, Victoria, and this must be the new Duchess. Victoria's eyes traveled over Eliza's dress, her hair, her face. How quaint. Lady Victoria, Eliza said evenly. How kind of you to acknowledge me. Well, we're all dying to know the truth, aren't we? Victoria's voice carried just far enough for nearby guests to hear. About how you managed to trap England's most eligible duke into marriage. Do share your secrets. I signed a contract, Eliza said. That's not much of a secret. But the circumstances. Surely there's more to it. No one accidentally marries a duke. Victoria laughed, bright and cruel. Unless you're very clever indeed. Careful, Victoria. Adrian's voice had gone cold. You're beginning to bore me. Am I? I thought I was being entertaining. Victoria tilted her head. Though I suppose your tastes have changed. You always did prefer women with more, substance, in every sense. The implication was clear. Eliza felt her face burn. That's enough, Adrian said quietly. Is it? I'm simply making conversation. Surely your little bride can handle a bit of society wit. I said that's enough. Adrian set down his champagne glass with deliberate care. Eliza, would you like to dance? Yes. He led her to the dance floor, leaving Victoria fuming behind them. The music swelled. Adrian's hand found Eliza's waist, drew her into the waltz. I'm sorry about that, he said as they moved. Don't be. She's not wrong. About what? I'm not beautiful like her, or elegant, or… Stop. Adrian's hand tightened on her waist. Victoria is beautiful. She's also shallow, vain, and cruel. You're none of those things. I'm ordinary. You're extraordinary. He met her eyes. Do you have any idea how rare it is to find someone who doesn't bore me, who challenges me, who makes me think? I make you think about how irritating I am. Sometimes, but mostly you make me think about… He stopped. Never mind. Adrian, let's just dance. So they danced, and for a few moments, Eliza forgot about the watching crowd, forgot about the newspaper articles and the gossip and the enemies circling. There was just the music and Adrian's hand on her waist, and the way he looked at her like she was something worth keeping. The waltz ended. Adrian led her off the floor, and walked directly into a man who made Lady Victoria look pleasant by comparison. Blackthorne, the man said. He was older, silver-haired, with cold eyes and an expression that suggested he'd never smiled in his life. I need a word. Lord Ashford. Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. I didn't realize you'd be here. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Lord Ashford's gaze slid to Eliza. Especially not when I can finally meet the woman who destroyed my son's engagement. Eliza's stomach dropped. Lord Ashford, Caroline's almost father-in-law, the man whose family's alliance had been shattered by her mistake. That wasn't intentional, she said. Wasn't it? Funny how these accidents always benefit someone. Lord Ashford's smile was razor thin. Tell me, how does it feel to know you're universally despised, that everyone in this room is laughing at you behind your back? Lord Ashford, Adrian's voice held warning. No, let her answer. I'm curious. Lord Ashford leaned closer. Because from where I'm standing, you're nothing but a social climbing opportunist who saw a chance and took it, and now you're dragging one of England's finest families through the mud. That's enough, Adrian said, stepping between them. Is it? I don't think so. I think it's time someone said what everyone's thinking. Lord Ashford's voice rose. That this marriage is a farce, that she's a fraud, and that you, Blackthorne, are a fool for honoring a contract that never should have existed in the first place. The ballroom had gone silent. Everyone was watching now, waiting. Adrian looked at Lord Ashford for a long moment. Then he smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. You're right, Adrian said softly. The contract never should have existed. It was a mistake from start to finish. Eliza's heart stopped. But it does exist, Adrian continued, and Eliza is my wife, which means when you insult her, you insult me. When you question her character, you question my judgment, and when you suggest I'm a fool, his voice dropped to something dangerous. You make an enemy you cannot afford. You're threatening me? I'm informing you. There's a difference. Adrian's smile widened. Now apologize to my wife. Or leave. Lord Ashford's face went purple. You can't. I can. And I am. Apologize or leave. The silence stretched. Everyone in the ballroom held their breath. Finally, Lord Ashford spat, "This isn't over," and stormed out. The crowd erupted in whispers. Adrian turned to Eliza. Are you all right? You just made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in England, Eliza said numbly. For me. Yes. Why? Because he was wrong. Adrian offered his arm. And because you're worth it. Now, shall we show these vultures we're not afraid of them? They stayed another hour, danced twice more, endured countless subtle insults and not-so-subtle stares. But Adrian never left her side, never let anyone see her flinch. By the time they left, Eliza was exhausted. The carriage ride home passed in silence, both of them too drained for conversation. But when they reached Blackthorne House, Adrian walked her to her door. "Thank you," Eliza said, "for tonight, for defending me." "You don't need to thank me for that." "I think I do." She met his eyes. No one's ever stood up for me like that before." "Then you've been around the wrong people." Adrian's hand came up, hesitated, then gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You're stronger than any of them. I hope you know that." His fingers lingered against her cheek. Eliza's breath caught. "Adrian!" A crash from downstairs made them both jump. Shouting, running footsteps. Adrian's hand dropped. "Stay here." "Like hell!" But he was already moving, taking the stairs two at a time. Eliza hiked up her skirts and followed. The entrance hall was chaos. Pemberton and two footmen struggling with someone. A man in dark clothes fighting like a cornered animal. Papers scattered across the marble floor. And blood. Too much blood. "Your Grace," he broke in. Pemberton grunted as the intruder's elbow caught his ribs. "He was in your study, Achipo." Adrian moved forward, grabbed the intruder, slammed him against the wall. The man's head cracked against marble. "Who are you?" Adrian demanded. "Who sent you?" The intruder laughed. Blood ran from his nose. "You think you're so clever, catching the housekeeper, playing house with your accidental bride. But you don't see what's coming. What's coming? Everything." The man's eyes locked on Eliza, starting with her. Then he twisted, fast as a snake, and something glinted in his hand. Not a knife. Something else. Something that looked like... "Gun!" Pemberton shouted. The world exploded into noise and smoke, and Adrian throwing himself at Eliza, taking her down hard, his weight crushing the air from her lungs as something whistled overhead and shattered the window behind them into 1,000 glittering pieces. The ringing in Eliza's ears drowned out everything else. Adrian's weight pressed her into the marble floor, his hand cradling her head, his body a shield between her and whatever had just happened. Smoke burned her throat. Glass glittered everywhere like scattered stars. "Stay down," Adrian said against her ear. His voice was steady despite everything. "Don't move." The footman had the intruder pinned now, face first against the floor. The gun. It had been a gun. She hadn't imagined it, lay several feet away, still smoking. Pemberton kicked it further, hands shaking. "Is anyone hurt?" Adrian called without moving. "Thomas took glass to the arm," one of the footmen answered. "But he'll live." "Your Grace, you're bleeding," Pemberton said. Adrian pushed himself up slightly, checking Eliza with his eyes before anything else. "Are you hurt?" "No, I don't think so." Eliza's hands were trembling. "Are you?" "It's nothing." But when he stood, pulling her up with him, she saw blood on his shoulder. Not a lot, but enough. "That's not nothing. It's a graze." Adrian's attention was already on the intruder. "Who sent you?" The man laughed again, that same disturbing sound. "You still don't understand. You think this is about money? About theft? Then what is it about?" "Power, control, everything you take for granted." The intruder's eyes, wild, almost fevered, fixed on Adrian. "And proving that even dukes can fall when the right pressure is applied." "Search him," Adrian told the footman. "Then send for the constables, and a doctor for Thomas." "Already done, Your Grace, ma'am," Pemberton said. They found papers in the intruder's coat. Not just any papers, documents detailing Blackthorne properties, business holdings, shipping schedules, and a list of names. Some Eliza recognized from the ball, others were unfamiliar. But all of them, according to the notations, were investors or business partners of Adrian's. "This is a dossier," Adrian said, scanning the pages with growing tension. "On me, on my business, on everyone connected to me. But why?" Eliza looked at the names. What were they planning? The intruder spat blood. You'll find out soon enough. Both of you, especially her. His eyes locked on Eliza. The convenient accident. The nobody who got too close. They're going to destroy you first, then him. Adrian's jaw tightened. Get him out of here. The footman hauled the intruder away. The constables arrived 10 minutes later, took statements, removed the would-be assassin. The doctor came shortly after, patched up Thomas's arm and insisted on examining Adrian's shoulder, despite his protests. It's barely a scratch, Adrian argued, as the doctor cleaned the wound. A scratch from a bullet, the doctor corrected. You're lucky. Another inch and it would have hit something vital. Eliza stood against the wall, watching, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had broken into their home, had shot at them, at her. The intruder's words kept echoing. They're going to destroy you first, then him. Who was they? And why? The doctor finished bandaging Adrian's shoulder and left with instructions to rest that Adrian immediately ignored. He sent the staff to bed, those who could sleep after the chaos, and locked himself in his study with the papers they'd found on the intruder. Eliza followed him. You should be resting, Adrian said without looking up from the documents spread across his desk. So should you. I need to figure out what this is. Then let me help. Eliza moved to stand beside him. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. He looked at her then, really looked at her. Someone just tried to kill you. They tried to kill both of us. Because of me. Because you're connected to me. His voice was rough. This is what I was afraid of. That being my wife would make you a target. Being your wife made me a lot of things, Eliza said. A target is just one more item on the list. This isn't a joke. I'm not joking. She picked up one of the papers. I'm terrified. My hands won't stop shaking, but I'm also furious. Someone came into our home, threatened us, shot at us. And you think I'm going to hide in my room while you figure out who and why? Adrian stared at her. You're insane. You've mentioned that before. Despite everything, his mouth twitched. So I have. Fault? They worked through the night. The documents told a story, once you knew how to read them. A conspiracy spanning months, maybe years. The list of names wasn't random. They were all people who'd invested in a venture Adrian had turned down 3 years ago. A mining operation in the Western Territories that had promised enormous returns. I investigated the company, Adrian explained, pulling out files from his own records. The geology reports didn't make sense. The projected yields were impossible. It was a fraud scheme designed to separate wealthy investors from their money. So you refused to invest, and warned others not to. Some listened, some didn't. Adrian tapped the list of names. These are the ones who didn't listen, who lost fortunes when the operation collapsed 6 months later. And they blame you? Apparently. Adrian's expression darkened, though blaming me for their own bad judgment seems excessive. People don't like admitting they were fooled, Eliza said. Easier to blame the person who was right. Easier to blame, and apparently easier to conspire together to destroy. Adrian pulled out another document, this one a ledger showing regular payments between the names on the list. They've been funding something, payments to various individuals over the past year, investigators maybe, or worse. Mrs. Hartwell? Possibly. The timing matches when she started stealing more aggressively. Adrian rubbed his eyes. If they paid her to create chaos in my household, to make me look incompetent, then the newspaper article makes sense too. They're trying to destroy your reputation from multiple angles. Eliza felt pieces clicking together. The theft made you look careless. The article made you look weak and controlled. And now an assassination attempt makes me look vulnerable. Adrian's voice was grim. Or dead, if they'd succeeded. The clock chimed 4. Dawn was still hours away. We need proof, Eliza said. Real proof that they're behind this. The documents help, but they're not enough. No, they're not. Adrian stared at the papers. We need someone to confess, or someone to turn on the others. The intruder? Already tried. He's not talking beyond cryptic threats. Adrian leaned back in his chair. And the constables can't hold him forever without concrete evidence of a larger conspiracy. Then we need to give them concrete evidence. How? Eliza's mind raced. You said some of these people listened to you, didn't invest. Who were they? Why does that matter? Because if we can find someone who was approached to join the conspiracy but refused, they might tell us what they know? Eliza started sorting through papers. Someone with a conscience, or at least someone who values their reputation more than revenge. Adrian watched her work. That's actually brilliant. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm impressed. There's a difference. They found 3 names of people who'd avoided the failed mining investment. By dawn, Adrian had sent discreet messages requesting urgent meetings. By noon, 2 had responded. Lord Wickham arrived first, an elderly gentleman with kind eyes and nervous hands. He took tea in Adrian's study and looked deeply uncomfortable. I heard about the incident last night, Irachi, he said. Terrible business. Are you both all right? We're fine, Adrian said. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Well, your message did sound urgent. Lord Wickham set down his tea. What's this about? Adrian laid out the situation, the conspiracy, the names, the evidence pointing to a coordinated effort to destroy him. I need to know, Adrian finished, if anyone approached you about joining them. Lord Wickham was quiet for a long moment, then he sighed. Lord Ashford came to me 2 months ago, said there was an opportunity to correct certain injustices, and asked if I'd be interested in contributing to a fund. What kind of fund? He didn't specify. Said it was better if I didn't know details, that it was about accountability and ensuring proper consequences for those who damaged others through arrogance and pride. Lord Wickham looked directly at Adrian. I assumed he meant you. And you said no? Of course I said no. Whatever grudge Ashford holds, I'm not interested in revenge schemes. He hesitated. But I got the impression I wasn't the only one approached. He mentioned others who'd seen reason and joined the cause. Did he give names? No, but he did mention meeting regularly, somewhere private. A club, perhaps, or... Lord Wickham frowned, trying to remember. He made a comment about sacred ground being appropriate for important work. I thought it was odd phrasing. Sacred ground, Eliza repeated. Like a church? Possibly, or... Adrian's eyes sharpened. There's a private club in the old district, built on the site of a former abbey. They call it the Sanctuary. Very exclusive, very private. Is Ashford a member? He is, so are several others on this list. Adrian stood. We need to find out what they're planning, and we need evidence that will hold up under legal scrutiny. How do we do that? Eliza asked. Adrian looked at her. We infiltrate their meeting. That's insane. You've called me insane several times now. Seems fair to return the favor. Adrian, if they catch you, they won't catch me, but they might catch us. He held her gaze. You said you wanted to be useful, that you wouldn't hide. Well, here's your chance. I need someone who can blend in as staff, who can observe without being noticed, someone overlooked. The word hit different now, not an insult, an asset. When? Eliza asked. Tomorrow night. According to Lord Wickham, they meet every week. Adrian's expression was serious. This is dangerous. If something goes wrong, it won't. You can't know that. No, Eliza agreed, but I trust you, and I'm not letting you do this alone. Something shifted in Adrian's face. Why? Why what? Why do you trust me? I dragged you into this life, this danger. I could void the marriage right now, send you somewhere safe, but you won't. Eliza moved closer. Because you're not the kind of man who abandons people, and I'm not the kind of woman who runs when things get hard. Even when you should? Especially then. Adrian reached out, his hand cupping her face. I meant what I said at the ball. You're worth defending, worth... He stopped, jaw tightening. If anything happens to you tomorrow night, it won't. But if it does, then you'll deal with it. We both will. Eliza covered his hand with hers. Together. The word hung between them. Together. Not a duke and his accidental wife. Not obligation or contract or convenience. Something real. Adrian's thumb brushed her cheek. You're extraordinary. You've said that before. I know. I'm hoping repetition will make you believe it. I'm working on it." He smiled then. Really smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Work faster." The sanctuary was exactly as private and exclusive as its reputation suggested. A converted abbey in the old district, all Gothic arches and stained glass, and an atmosphere of barely reformed piety. The kind of place where powerful men gathered to feel important. Eliza entered through the service entrance at 7, dressed as a serving girl, hair pinned back, plain dress, eyes downcast. The overlooked daughter playing her oldest role. Nobody looked at her twice. The housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Price, thrust a tray of wine glasses into her hands. "Third floor, east chamber, refreshments every 20 minutes. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not linger. Do not make eye contact." "Yes, ma'am." "And girl, whatever you hear, you forget the moment you leave this building. These are important men conducting private business. Understood?" "Understood." Mrs. Price sent her upstairs with 2 other serving girls who looked just as invisible as Eliza felt. The east chamber was a converted chapel, complete with vaulted ceiling and religious iconography that seemed ironic given the conspiracy being planned within. 8 men sat around a table, Lord Ashford at the head, all of them from Adrian's list. Eliza set down the tray, poured wine, kept her eyes down and her ears open. "And the attempt failed," one man was saying. "Blackthorne and his little bride are both alive." "Then we try again," Lord Ashford said coldly, "until we succeed." "This is madness," another voice protested. "Murder? We agreed on destroying his reputation, his business, not... His reputation isn't enough." Ashford slammed his hand on the table. "He made fools of us, cost us fortunes, destroyed our credibility. Words and scandal aren't sufficient punishment. But if we're caught, we won't be caught. We've been careful. The housekeeper has been dealt with. The assassin knows nothing useful, and soon Blackthorne will be dead, his estate in chaos, and we can reclaim what we lost." "And the wife?" someone asked. "The girl?" "Her especially." Ashford's voice dripped venom. "She's been poking around, asking questions. She found the theft. She's dangerous." "She's nobody." "Nobody doesn't find hidden ledgers and spot patterns. Nobody doesn't convince a duke to defend her publicly." Ashford stood, pacing. "She's smarter than we gave her credit for, which makes her the bigger threat." Eliza's hands shook as she poured wine. "Careful. Don't react. Don't give yourself away." "So what's the plan?" another man asked. "Simple. Tomorrow, Blackthorne is scheduled to inspect his northern properties, traveling alone, as usual. The road passes through the Thornwood forest." Ashford smiled. "Tragic how many carriages have accidents in those woods. Bandits, highwaymen, so dangerous. And the wife will have an accident of her own, at home. A fall, perhaps, or a fire. Something suitably tragic." Ashford lifted his glass. "By week's end, the Blackthorne problem will be solved, and we can begin recovering what that arrogant bastard cost us." The men drank. Eliza finished pouring and slipped out, heart hammering. She had what they needed: confession, specific plans, concrete evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. Now she just needed to get it to Adrian without getting caught. She made it to the 2nd floor before someone grabbed her arm. "You!" One of Ashford's men. She recognized him from the table. "You're new?" "Started today, sir." Eliza kept her voice meek, her eyes down. "Look at me." She looked. Prayed he wouldn't recognize her from the ball. Different context, different clothes. People never really saw servants. "You heard nothing upstairs, you understand?" "I don't understand what you mean, sir. I heard gentlemen talking, but I weren't listening. Not my place." He studied her for a long moment, then released her arm. "See that you keep it that way." Eliza curtsied and escaped. Adrian was waiting 2 streets over in an unmarked carriage. Eliza climbed in, pulled off the servant's cap, and let herself shake. "Are you all right?" Adrian asked immediately. "Fine, I'm fine." She took a breath. "And I have everything we need." She told him what she'd heard, every word, every detail. Adrian's expression grew darker with each sentence. "Tomorrow," he said when she finished. "They're planning to kill us tomorrow. So we go to the constable's tonight. with everything we know. It's not enough. They'll deny it. Call it hearsay. My word against theirs. Adrian's jaw tightened. But if we can catch them in the act, you want to let them try to kill you? I want to give them rope to hang themselves with. Let them set up the ambush in Thornwood, but we'll be ready. Adrian's eyes were cold, with constables, witnesses, undeniable proof of attempted murder. That's incredibly dangerous. Yes, you could actually die. I'm aware. And you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it to end this. Adrian took her hand. So you're safe. So we're both safe. So these bastards can't threaten us anymore. Eliza squeezed his fingers. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Adrian, they're planning to kill me too, remember? An accident of her own? If you're in Thornwood, I'm safer with you than alone in the house. That's... He stopped, thought. Actually a valid point. I'm full of those. So I'm learning. Adrian pulled her closer, pressed his forehead to hers. If anything goes wrong tomorrow, it won't. But if it does, then we'll handle it together. Eliza pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Stop trying to protect me from everything. I'm not fragile. I know you're not. His voice was rough. That's not why I want to protect you. Then why? Because somewhere between that first terrible dinner and tonight, He stopped, swallowed. Because I care what happens to you, and that's terrifying. Eliza's breath caught. Adrian, don't. He released her hand, pulled back. Don't say anything. Not now. Not when tomorrow could... He couldn't finish. Tomorrow, we're going to win, Eliza said firmly. We're going to catch them, stop them, and then we're going to have a very long conversation about whatever this is between us. Is there something between us? You know there is. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then, yes, I do. The next morning, Adrian made a great show of preparing for his northern trip. Trunks packed, carriage readied, public announcement of his schedule, everything designed to look normal while constables and Adrian's most trusted men positioned themselves along the Thornwood Road. Eliza rode with him, not as his wife, that would have been too suspicious, but disguised again, this time as his secretary. Another overlooked role, another mask. The forest was appropriately ominous, thick trees, narrow road, perfect for ambush. Nervous? Adrian asked as the carriage rolled deeper into the woods. Terrified. You? The same. He checked the pistol hidden in his coat. But ready. They didn't have to wait long. The carriage had barely reached the deepest part of the forest when armed men stepped onto the road. 6 of them, faces covered, weapons drawn. Stand and deliver, one shouted. The carriage stopped. Adrian's driver, actually a constable in disguise, raised his hands. Adrian opened the carriage door, stepped out, looked appropriately terrified. Take whatever you want, he said, voice shaking just right. Just don't hurt us. It's not your money we want, Your Grace. The leader pulled down his mask, revealing one of Ashford's men from the meeting. It's your life. On whose orders? You know whose. The man raised his pistol. Lord Ashford sends his regards. Does he? Adrian's fear vanished. What about the constables? What constables? These ones. Men stepped from the trees, 20 constables armed and ready. More appeared behind the ambushers surrounding them. Drop your weapons, the chief constable ordered. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Chaos erupted. Some of the ambushers tried to run. Others fought. But they were outnumbered and outsmarted. Within minutes, all 6 were in custody. Search them, Adrian ordered. I want every piece of correspondence, every instruction, every link back to Ashford. They found plenty, written orders, payment records, detailed plans. Everything needed to prove Lord Ashford's involvement. We have him, the chief constable said with satisfaction. We have all of them. Not yet. Adrian's expression was grim. Ashford's still free, and he's probably going after Eliza right now. I'm right here, Eliza said, stepping out of the carriage. The other Eliza, the one he thinks is alone at Blackthorne House. Adrian was already moving. We need to get back. Now. They'd left a decoy at the house. One of the household staff who resembled Eliza from a distance, positioned where she'd be visible through windows. bait to draw out anyone coming for her. They raced back to the city, Adrian's real men riding ahead to secure the house. But when they arrived, smoke was already rising from the east wing. Fire. Ashford's plan for Eliza. He'd actually done it. "Get water!" Adrian was shouting, running toward the flames. "Where's the decoy? Where's Emma?" "Here, Your Grace." The maid appeared, coughing, supported by Pemberton. "He came through the window, started the fire. I barely got out." "Who came?" "Lord Ashford himself." Pemberton's face was grim. "He's still inside, looking for the Duchess." Adrian started toward the burning building. Eliza grabbed his arm. "You can't go in there. If he finds out there's no one to kill, he'll run. We need him." Adrian pulled free. "Stay here." "Adrian." But he was already gone, disappeared into smoke and flame. Eliza stood frozen for approximately 3 seconds before following him. The house was an inferno. Heat and smoke and the awful sound of wood cracking. Eliza pulled her scarf over her mouth and nose, squinted through the haze. "Adrian!" "Eliza?" His voice came from somewhere ahead. "What the hell are you doing in here?" "Same thing you are." She found him on the second floor, confronting Lord Ashford in what used to be a hallway. Ashford held a pistol. He looked wild-eyed, desperate, dangerous. "You're supposed to be dead," he snarled at Eliza. "Disappointed? You ruined everything. All of you. Blackthorne, his arrogance, and you." He swung the pistol toward her. "You were supposed to be nothing, an easy target, but you just kept surviving." "That's a bad habit of mine," Eliza said, moving carefully. Adrian was circling right. She moved left, splitting Ashford's attention. "This isn't over," Ashford said. "Even if you escape, even if I'm caught, there are others. More conspirators, more plans." "There aren't." Adrian's voice was cold. "We have all of them. Every name, every piece of evidence. Your conspiracy is over. Then I have nothing to lose." Ashford's finger tightened on the trigger. Eliza threw herself sideways. Adrian lunged forward. The gun went off, deafening in the enclosed space, but the shot went wild, embedding in the ceiling. Adrian tackled Ashford, and they went down hard. The gun skittered across the floor. Eliza grabbed it, pointed it at Ashford with shaking hands. "Don't move," she said. Ashford looked at her from beneath Adrian's weight, laughed, bitter and broken. "You won't shoot. Want to test that theory?" He didn't. The constables arrived minutes later, flooding into the burning building to extract them all. They dragged Ashford out in chains while firefighters battled the blaze. By the time the smoke cleared, half the east wing was destroyed. But everyone was alive, and the conspiracy was broken. 3 days later, the trial began. Lord Ashford and 7 co-conspirators faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder, arson, theft, and a dozen other crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimony from the captured assassins, documents detailing payments and plans, Eliza's account of what she'd heard at the sanctuary. The verdict came quickly. Guilty. All of them. Lord Ashford was stripped of his title, his property seized. The others faced similar fates. Years in prison, fortunes destroyed, reputations shattered beyond repair. And suddenly, society had a different narrative. The Duke who'd honored an accidental contract despite mockery. The overlooked daughter who'd uncovered corruption and stopped a murderous conspiracy. The marriage that everyone had called a mistake but had somehow become something else. Invitations poured in. Apologies arrived by messenger. Lady Henderson herself sent a note expressing her deepest regrets for any misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, Eliza read aloud, sitting in Adrian's study. As if she didn't spend that entire ball letting people insult me. "You could ignore it," Adrian suggested from behind his desk. "I could, or I could respond." Eliza picked up a pen, something polite but pointed. "Let her know we remember exactly how she behaved. Vindictive." "Earned," Adrian smiled. "I like this version of you. This has always been me. You just had to look past overlooked daughter to see it." "I'm seeing it now." He stood, moved to stand beside her. "The question is what happens next." "Next?" "The threat is gone. The conspiracy is broken. You could—" He stopped. "You could ask for that annulment now, if you wanted. I wouldn't fight it." Eliza set down the pen slowly. Is that what you want? No. The word came quickly, definitely. But what I want isn't what matters. You deserve a choice, a real choice. I had a choice 3 weeks ago, Eliza said. I could have screamed fraud, could have refused, could have fought you every step of the way. You did fight me every step of the way. Not on that, not on staying. She turned to face him. I chose this marriage, Adrian. Maybe it started as an accident, but it's not an accident anymore. What is it? I don't know yet, but I want to find out. Eliza stood, closing the distance between them. If you do. Adrian's hand came up, cupped her face. I told you I cared what happened to you. That was incomplete. Incomplete how? I care about you, not what happens to you. You. His thumb brushed her cheek. Somewhere between that first terrible dinner and now, you became... He stopped, searching for words. Everything. Eliza's breath caught. Everything? Everything I didn't know I was missing. Everything I didn't think I deserved. Everything I'm terrified of losing. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I love you. I think I've loved you since you refused to be obedient, and I realized I'd accidentally married someone extraordinary. Tears burned Eliza's eyes. You love me. Terribly. Inconveniently. Completely. Adrian's forehead rested against hers. And if you don't feel the same, I'll survive. But I had to tell you. Had to let you know this isn't obligation or contract or... Adrian? Yes? Stop talking. All right? Why... Eliza kissed him. Finally, after weeks of dancing around it, she kissed him. And he kissed her back like he'd been waiting for permission, his hand sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian was smiling. That was about time, Eliza suggested. I was going to say perfect, but yes, also that. I love you too, Eliza said, in case that wasn't clear. It was moderately clear, though I wouldn't mind hearing it again. I love you. I've loved you since you defended me at the ball. Maybe before. Definitely after. She pulled him down for another kiss. And I'm not going anywhere. Good. Because I'm not letting you go. 2 weeks later, the society papers ran a new story. Not about scandals or conspiracies or accidental marriages, about the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorne's first official public appearance since the trial. They attended the theater, walked in together, Adrian's hand at Eliza's back, sat in the Duke's private box where everyone could see them. And when people whispered, it wasn't with mockery anymore. It was with respect, sometimes fear, occasionally awe. The overlooked daughter had become the Duchess who'd toppled a conspiracy. The cold Duke had become the man who'd chosen love over reputation. And the marriage that was supposed to be a mistake had become something society couldn't ignore. After the performance, as they waited for their carriage, a young woman approached hesitantly. Your Grace? I'm sorry to intrude, but I had to tell you, she addressed Eliza directly. What you did, exposing those men, stopping them, it was extraordinary. You're an inspiration. Eliza blinked. I'm not. You are. To women like me who always thought we had to be quiet and agreeable, you proved we could be smart and strong and still... The woman blushed. Anyway, thank you. She hurried away before Eliza could respond. An inspiration, Adrian said, sounding amused. That's new. That's terrifying. Because I'm just... Eliza stopped. I'm not extraordinary, I'm just me. Yes. Adrian pulled her close. Exactly. The carriage arrived. They climbed in, and as it pulled away from the theater, Eliza leaned against Adrian's shoulder. Do you think it'll always be like this? She asked. People watching, judging. Probably. Does that bother you? Not as much as it should. Eliza smiled. Because they're not seeing an overlooked daughter anymore. They're seeing me. Really me. Good. Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. Because you're worth seeing. The carriage rolled through London's streets, carrying them home. To Blackthorne House, where reconstruction on the East Wing was already underway, where new staff had been hired, loyal and honest, where dinner would be waiting, and afterward they'd probably argue about something. They still argued constantly, but it would be the good kind of arguing, the kind that led to understanding rather than distance. Eliza had been right that first night. This marriage wasn't perfect. They both had sharp edges and stubborn streaks, but it was theirs, built not on accident, but choice. Every day, choosing each other. The woman no one noticed had become impossible to ignore, and the Duke who controlled everything had learned that the best things in life were the ones you couldn't control at all. They couldn't plan them, couldn't predict them, couldn't stop them from changing everything. Sometimes you just had to sign the paper and see what happened next. Sometimes you just had to sign the paper and see what happened next. But what happened next, Eliza was learning, was harder than surviving conspiracies and assassination attempts. What came next was actually living with the choice you'd made. 3 months after the trial, on a gray November morning that threatened rain, Eliza stood in the rebuilt East Wing and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Not about Adrian, never about Adrian, but about everything else. About thinking she could actually do this. Be a duchess, manage a household, navigate society's endless maze of unwritten rules and expectations. The new housekeeper, Mrs. Davies, hired after extensive vetting and reference checking, appeared in the doorway with a concerned expression. "Your Grace, the Marchioness of Westfield has arrived early for tea. She's waiting in the blue drawing room." Eliza's stomach dropped. Lady Westfield was society royalty, ancient title, impeccable connections, and the kind of influence that could make or break reputations with a single cutting remark. Adrian had warned her the Marchioness would eventually come calling, testing the new Duchess to see if she was worth acknowledging. "Thank you, Mrs. Davies. I'll be down shortly." The housekeeper hesitated. "Your Grace, if I may, the Marchioness is notoriously particular about tea service. Perhaps I should review the arrangements." It was kindly meant, but Eliza heard the subtext. "You're going to mess this up. That won't be necessary. I'll manage." Mrs. Davies bowed and retreated, leaving Eliza to stare at her reflection in the window. She'd changed so much in 3 months. Better dresses, more confidence, the kind of polish that came from Adrian's patient coaching and her own stubborn determination. But underneath, she was still the overlooked daughter who'd never been good enough. "Stop it," she told her reflection. "You've survived worse than afternoon tea with a judgmental aristocrat." Though honestly, she wasn't certain that was true. The blue drawing room lived up to its name, all pale blues and silvers designed to make visitors feel simultaneously welcomed and inferior. Lady Westfield sat enthroned in the best chair, a woman in her 60s with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Your Grace," Eliza said, executing what she hoped was an appropriate curtsy. "Welcome to Blackthorne House." "Duchess," Lady Westfield's voice could have etched glass. "How kind of you to receive me." "The kindness is yours in visiting," Eliza signaled for tea. "I hope you'll forgive the informality. I'm still learning the household." "After 3 months?" One elegant eyebrow rose. "Most duchesses master their households within weeks. Most duchesses were trained for the position. I wasn't." The honesty surprised them both. Lady Westfield's expression shifted slightly, not quite approval, but interest. "No, the Marchioness agreed. "You weren't. The circumstances of your marriage are well known, as is your subsequent adventure." "Adventure is a polite word for it. I'm being charitable. Others called it scandal." Lady Westfield accepted her tea with the kind of precision that suggested she was evaluating every aspect of the service. "But then, others also called you an opportunistic fraud. That assessment appears to have been premature. It was certainly inaccurate." "Was it?" The Marchioness took a deliberate sip. "You signed a contract that bound you to one of England's most powerful men. You investigated corruption in his household. You exposed a conspiracy. And now you're a duchess with significant influence. That sounds rather opportunistic to me." Eliza's hands tightened on her teacup. "If you came here to insult me, I came here to understand you." Lady Westfield set down her tea. "Society is in flux, child. Women like you, clever, unconventional, refusing to be overlooked, you're either going to change everything or destroy it. I need to know which." "I don't want to destroy anything." That's not what I asked. The words hung between them. Eliza realized this wasn't just a social call. It was an evaluation. Lady Westfield was deciding whether to support or oppose her, and that decision would ripple through society like a stone through still water. I want, Eliza said carefully, to prove that worth isn't determined by birth or beauty or perfect adherence to arbitrary rules. I want women to know they can be smart and strong and imperfect and still deserve respect. And I want to build something real with my husband instead of performing a role for everyone else's comfort. And if doing that threatens the established order, then the established order needs examining. Lady Westfield was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. You're dangerous. Is that a compliment? The highest one I can give. The Marchioness stood. I came here expecting a social climbing nobody playing Duchess. Instead, I find someone who might actually deserve the title. How refreshing. Eliza stood as well, not quite sure what was happening. Does that mean... It means I'm hosting a dinner next month. You and Blackthorne will attend. I'll introduce you properly to people who matter, and we'll see if you're as clever at navigating political alliances as you are at catching criminals. Why would you help me? Because change is coming whether we like it or not. I'd rather guide it than be trampled by it. Lady Westfield moved toward the door, then paused. Also, anyone who can make Lord Ashford weep during his trial has earned my respect. That man was insufferable. Then she was gone, leaving Eliza standing in the blue drawing room, wondering what had just happened. Adrian found her there 20 minutes later, still processing. I saw Lady Westfield's carriage leaving. How bad was it? She called me dangerous. That sounds like her. Adrian moved to stand beside her. Should I be worried? She meant it as a compliment, I think, and she invited us to dinner. Eliza looked at him. She's going to introduce us to people who matter. The Marchioness of Westfield is endorsing you? Adrian's eyebrows rose. That's actually extraordinary. Why? Because she's society's most influential tastemaker. If she accepts you, everyone else will follow. Adrian pulled Eliza close. You've done it. You've won. Won what? The respect you were fighting for. The recognition. He kissed her forehead. The right to be seen as yourself instead of a mistake. Eliza leaned into him, letting herself feel the victory. But underneath it was something else. A restlessness she couldn't quite name. What's wrong? Adrian asked, reading her too easily now. Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She pulled back slightly. I thought once we stopped the conspiracy, once society accepted us, everything would be easier? Simple. But it's not simple. There are still people who dislike me. Still moments when I feel like I'm playing a role instead of living my life. Still days when I wake up and think... She stopped. Think what? That maybe I don't belong here after all. Adrian was quiet for a moment, then, come with me. He led her through the house to his private study, the room where they'd first planned the investigation, where they'd fallen in love between legal documents and conspiracy theories. He pulled a folder from his desk, handed it to her. What is this? Open it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Eliza. Where did these come from? Women, Adrian said. From all over England. They started arriving a month ago, after the trial, after the newspapers published your story. Eliza read the first letter with trembling hands. It was from a merchant's daughter in Liverpool, thanking Eliza for showing her that intelligence was worth more than a pretty face. The second was from a widow in Bath, praising her courage in standing up to powerful men. The third was from a girl barely 16, saying Eliza had inspired her to pursue mathematics despite her family's objections. There were more. So many more. Women thanking her, praising her, asking for advice, telling her she'd changed their lives simply by refusing to be overlooked. I didn't know, Eliza whispered. I've been collecting them, waiting for the right moment to show you. Adrian's hand rested on her shoulder. You think you don't belong here, but these women disagree. They think you belong exactly where you are, doing exactly what you're doing. I'm not doing anything extraordinary. You're being yourself, publicly, unapologetically. That's revolutionary for women like them. Like you. He turned her to face him. You asked me once what you were worth. Here's your answer. You're worth every letter in that folder, every life you've touched, every woman who sees you and thinks, maybe I can do that too. Eliza couldn't speak through the tears. She just held the folder and let herself believe, really believe, that maybe she hadn't made a mistake. Maybe she'd made exactly the right choice. Thank you, she managed finally. For what? For seeing me. For choosing me. For... Her voice broke. For making me believe I was worth choosing. Adrian pulled her close, and they stood like that for a long time, surrounded by evidence that one woman's courage could ripple outward in ways she'd never imagined. Lady Westfield's dinner was exactly as intimidating as promised. 30 guests, all of them influential, most of them skeptical. Eliza spent the first hour feeling like a specimen under examination. But somewhere between the third course and the fourth, something shifted. A young viscountess asked about the investigation. Eliza answered honestly, about the fear, the mistakes, the moments when she'd been certain she'd fail, about being underestimated and using that to her advantage. That's brilliant, the viscountess said, using their dismissiveness as camouflage. It wasn't strategy, it was survival. Eliza met the woman's eyes. But yes, it worked. More questions followed, about the conspiracy, about standing up to Lord Ashford, about managing fear while doing dangerous work. Eliza answered them all, refusing to pretend she'd been brave when she'd mostly been terrified. And slowly, the atmosphere changed. People leaned forward instead of back, asked genuine questions instead of making veiled criticisms, looked at her with something that might have been respect. Adrian watched from across the table with barely concealed pride. After dinner, Lady Westfield found Eliza on the terrace, escaping the crowd for a moment. "You did well," the Marchioness said without preamble. "I was honest. I'm not sure that's the same as doing well. In society, it's revolutionary." Lady Westfield gazed out at the London night. "I've been watching you, child, wondering if you understood the opportunity you've been given." Opportunity? To reshape what it means to be a woman of influence, to prove that strength and intelligence matter more than breeding and beauty. The Marchioness glanced at her. "You could be a footnote, the accidental duchess who got lucky, or you could be something more. The question is whether you're brave enough." Brave enough for what? To keep being exactly what you are, loudly, consistently, despite everyone who'll tell you to be quieter, smaller, more conventional. Lady Westfield's voice was serious. "It won't be easy. You'll make enemies. You'll be criticized. But you'll also change things. For women like those who wrote you letters. For daughters who deserve better than being overlooked." Eliza thought about the folder in Adrian's study. About Caroline, who'd found courage to refuse a loveless marriage. About the young woman at the theater who'd called her an inspiration. "Yes," she said. "I'm brave enough." "Good." Lady Westfield smiled. "Then let's discuss what comes next." What came next was work, real work, not just social appearances and household management. Lady Westfield introduced Eliza to women who were quietly building power outside traditional channels. Business owners, property investors, women who'd found ways to control their own money and lives, despite legal restrictions. "The law says we're property," one woman explained during a gathering at Lady Westfield's townhouse. "But the law is changing, slowly, and in the meantime, we work around it." "How?" Eliza asked. "Trusts, investments in our maiden names, business partnerships with brothers or husbands who understand." The woman, Lady Morrison, wealthy widow and secret owner of 3 textile mills, met Eliza's eyes. "We build power in the shadows until we're strong enough to step into the light. And you want me to help?" "You're already in the light. You have visibility, legitimacy, a duke for a husband who actually supports you." Lady Morrison leaned forward. "Use it. Help other women. Invest in their businesses. Give them opportunities. Be the bridge between their work and society's acceptance." "I don't have much money of my own. You have access to money, and connections, and a reputation for intelligence and courage. Lady Westfield cut through her protests. That's more than most women ever get. The question is what you'll do with it. Eliza looked around the room, at women who'd been fighting these battles for years, who'd survived and succeeded despite everything stacked against them, who were offering to let her join them. "Tell me what you need," she said. The work started small. Eliza used her allowance to invest in a publishing house run by women, producing books by female authors who couldn't get contracts elsewhere. She convinced Adrian to hire women for positions traditionally reserved for men: clerks, bookkeepers, property managers. She opened Blackthorne House for monthly gatherings where women could discuss business and politics without men dismissing their ideas as frivolous. Society noticed. Some praised her charity, others criticized her impropriety. But the women who mattered, the ones building futures for themselves and their daughters, those women noticed too. And they remembered. 6 months after Lady Westfield's dinner, Eliza received an invitation that changed everything. The Women's Property Rights Committee was hosting a public forum on proposed reforms to marriage law. They wanted her to speak. "Absolutely not," Adrian said when she showed him the invitation. "Why not?" "Because it's too public, too political. You'll make enemies, powerful enemies, if you publicly support legal reforms. I'll make enemies by staying silent, too. Women who think I've abandoned them once I got comfortable." "Eliza, Adrian, I have to do this." She met his eyes. These reforms would give married women the right to own property, to keep their own money, to have legal existence beyond their husbands. That matters. "I know it matters. But you speaking about it publicly?" He ran his hand through his hair. "You'll be associating yourself with radicals. With women, society considers dangerous. Society considered me dangerous 6 months ago. That worked out well. This is different. How?" "Because marriage law affects everyone. You won't just be threatening individual men, you'll be threatening the entire social structure." Adrian's voice was tight. "They'll come after you, after us. Everything we've built could collapse. Or it could get stronger." Eliza moved closer. "You told me I was worth defending, that I changed things just by being myself. But if I only be myself when it's convenient, when it's safe, then what's the point? The point is staying alive and secure. The point is mattering, really mattering." She took his hand. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I can't be the Duchess who inspired women and then went silent the moment real change was possible." Adrian was quiet for a long time. "You're going to do this whether I agree or not, aren't you? I'd rather have your support, but yes." "Then you have it." He pulled her close. "But I'm coming with you. If you're going to be brave and reckless, someone needs to watch your back." "Always?" "Always." The forum was packed. Women filled the hall, some society ladies, many more from working classes who'd saved for months to attend. Men lined the back, some supportive, most hostile. And at the front, Eliza stood at a podium feeling like she might vomit. 3 other women spoke first. A lawyer's wife, a factory owner, a doctor who'd had to practice under her brother's name. All of them eloquent, passionate, certain. Then it was Eliza's turn. She looked out at the crowd, found Adrian in the 3rd row, nodding encouragement. Found Lady Westfield near the front, expression approving. Found dozens of unfamiliar faces watching, waiting. "I didn't plan to be here," Eliza began, and her voice only shook a little. "I didn't plan to be a duchess. I certainly didn't plan to become someone who stands in front of crowds arguing for legal reform. But life has a way of ignoring our plans." Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. "I signed a marriage contract by accident," Eliza continued, "and that accident gave me something most women never get. A husband who treats me as an equal, who values my intelligence, who lets me control my own money and make my own decisions. But the law says he doesn't have to. The law says I'm his property, that everything I own is his, that I have no legal existence separate from him." The hostile men at the back started muttering. Eliza ignored them. "I'm lucky. My husband chooses to treat me well. But women shouldn't need luck. They shouldn't need to pray their husbands are decent men. They should have legal protection, legal rights, legal existence." Her voice grew stronger. "And if that makes me a radical, then I'm a radical. If that threatens social order, then social order needs threatening. Someone in the back shouted, "You're a disgrace to your class." "I'm a woman," Eliza replied. "That's my only class that matters today." The room erupted. Applause from the women, jeers from hostile men, debate breaking out in pockets across the hall. And through it all, Adrian watching her with an expression that said he'd never been more proud. The speech made headlines. Duchess Blackthorne calls for legal reform, society divided on property rights. Is this the future of marriage? The backlash was immediate and vicious, calling her unwomanly, suggesting Adrian couldn't control his own wife, threatening social consequences. Several business associates approached Adrian privately, suggesting he manage Eliza better. "Manage us," Adrian repeated to one such associate, Lord Pemberton, in his study. Eliza could hear the conversation from the corridor. She'd stopped to listen when she heard her name. "Guide her," Lord Pemberton amended. "Help her understand the damage she's doing to your reputation, to both of your positions in society. My wife understands perfectly. She's doing exactly what she intends. But the reforms she's supporting, they're dangerous. They'll upset the natural order." "The natural order," Adrian interrupted, "is a myth men tell themselves to justify treating women as property. Eliza is not my property. She's my partner. And if you or anyone else can't accept that, you're welcome to take your business elsewhere." Silence. "Then, you'd risk everything for her? Your reputation? Your business relationships?" "I'd risk everything for what's right. She just happens to be right." Adrian's voice was steel. "Now get out of my house." Eliza waited until Lord Pemberton had stormed past before entering the study. "You heard that?" Adrian asked. "Most of it. I meant every word." "I know." Eliza crossed to him. "But I also know what it's costing you. The business relationships, the social standing, can be rebuilt. What we have can't." He pulled her into his arms. "Besides, I'm discovering I rather like being married to a dangerous radical. It's more interesting than being respected by boring men with outdated values. You're insane. So I've been told by you repeatedly. And you still won't listen. Never." He kissed her. "Especially not when you're right." The property rights reforms passed 2 years later. Not everything the committee wanted, but enough. Married women gained the right to own property in their own names, to keep inheritances separate from their husbands, to have legal standing in contracts and court proceedings. It was a beginning. Just a beginning. But beginnings mattered. Eliza stood in the gallery of Parliament the day the vote was announced, Adrian beside her, Lady Westfield on her other side. When the results were read, majority in favor, the gallery erupted in applause. "You did this," Lady Westfield said quietly. "Your speech started the momentum." "I just said what needed saying. That's all any of us can do." The Marchioness met her eyes. "But you said it loudly enough that people had to listen. That's the difference." That night, Blackthorne House hosted a celebration. Women who'd fought for the reforms, men who'd supported them, society members who'd come around, even a few who'd opposed the changes but respected the victory. Caroline was there. She'd arrived in London 3 months earlier, having finally convinced their mother to let her visit. The years had changed her, less focused on beauty, more interested in the publishing house Eliza had invested in. She was working there now, reading manuscripts, offering editorial advice. "I'm proud of you, Caroline said, finding Eliza in a quiet corner, "for all of this, for fighting when you could have just been comfortable." "I learned it from watching you," Eliza said. "You refused Lord Richard when it would have been easier to accept. That was brave." "That was terrified." Caroline smiled. "But I'm glad I did it. Just like you're glad you gave that speech, even though it was terrifying." "How do you know it was terrifying?" "Because bravery is always terrifying. That's what makes it brave." They stood together, watching the celebration. Two sisters who'd started overlooked and ended up impossible to ignore. Not through beauty or perfect behavior, but through refusing to be quiet when it mattered. Adrian found Eliza later as the party wound down. "Dance with me?" "There's no music." "Then we'll make our own." They danced in the empty ballroom, just the two of them, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. "Do you remember," Adrian said, "that first dinner?" When you told me you didn't do obedient very well, I thought you were going to send me away. I almost did. Then I realized you were the most interesting thing that had happened to me in years. He pulled her closer. Best accident of my life. It wasn't an accident by the end. No, by the end it was a choice, every day, choosing each other. Every day, Eliza agreed. They danced until the candles burned low, until the servants had cleaned the last of the party mess, until it was just them in the vast house that had become home, not because it was grand, but because they'd built something real within its walls. 5 years later, Eliza stood in that same ballroom, now filled with women attending the first annual Blackthorne Foundation gathering. The foundation, funded jointly by Eliza and Adrian, supported women's education, business ventures, and legal advocacy. It had grown from a small project to one of England's most influential charitable organizations. "Your Grace, the next speaker is ready," an assistant whispered. Eliza nodded, moved to the front of the room. The ballroom that had once hosted society gossips now held women changing the world. Entrepreneurs, educators, activists, women who'd been overlooked and invisible, now building futures for themselves and others. "Thank you for coming," Eliza began. 5 years ago, I stood in this room feeling like an imposter, like I didn't belong here, didn't deserve this platform. Some of you know that feeling, the sense that you're not enough, not qualified, not worthy of being seen and heard. Heads nodded throughout the crowd. I'm here to tell you that feeling is a lie. You are enough. You are qualified by your experiences, your intelligence, your courage to keep going when everything tells you to give up. And you are worthy, not because of who you married or what you look like or how perfectly you follow rules that were designed to keep you small. You're worthy because you exist, because you matter, because your voice deserves to be heard. She paused, looking out at faces both familiar and new. We're living in a world that's changing, slowly, frustratingly slowly, but changing. Because women like you refuse to stay silent, refuse to be overlooked, refuse to accept that your value is determined by anyone except yourself. Keep refusing, keep fighting, keep being brave, even when it terrifies you. And remember, every single one of you is extraordinary, not despite your imperfections, but because of them. Because you're real, because you're human, because you keep trying even when you fail. Eliza's voice grew stronger. That's what changes the world, not perfection, just persistent, imperfect, stubborn humanity. The applause was deafening. Adrian, watching from the side, had tears in his eyes. After the gathering, they walked through the rebuilt gardens. Autumn leaves scattered the paths, and the air carried the promise of winter. That was beautiful, Adrian said. The speech. I've had practice. You've had courage. There's a difference. He stopped walking, turned to face her. I've been thinking about something. Should I be worried? Possibly. He smiled. We've been married 5 years, built this foundation, changed laws, made enemies and allies, but we've never actually... He stopped, looking almost shy. We've never had a real wedding. We had a contract signing in a magistrate's office. That's not the same. Adrian, let me finish. I want to marry you again, properly this time, with vows we write, with everyone who matters watching, with flowers and music and all the ceremony we skipped the first time. His hands found hers. I want to choose you again. Publicly, deliberately, in front of everyone who said we'd never last. Tears burned Eliza's eyes. You want a wedding? I want to celebrate what we have, what we've built, what we choose every single day. Adrian's voice was rough with emotion. And I want you to have the day you deserved the first time. The recognition, the joy, everything that got stolen by accident and conspiracy. I don't need a wedding to know you chose me. I know, but I need it. I need to stand up in front of everyone and say, this woman is my partner, my equal, my choice. I need them to hear it, to witness it, to understand that this marriage, this partnership, is the best thing I've ever done. Yes, Eliza whispered. Yes, let's have a wedding. The wedding took place the following spring, in the Blackthorne estate chapel that had stood empty for decades. Not a huge affair, they'd both had enough of performing for crowds, but meaningful. People who mattered, friends, family, women from the foundation, even Lady Westfield, who dabbed at her eyes and pretended she wasn't crying. Caroline stood beside Eliza as her attendant, wearing a dress from their publishing house's fashion designer, one of dozens of businesses the foundation supported. "Ready?" Caroline asked as they waited to enter the chapel. "Terrified." "Good. Means it matters." Caroline squeezed her hand. "You're going to be brilliant. I'm going to trip on this dress and embarrass us both. Then you'll get up and keep going. That's what you do." The chapel doors opened, music swelled, and Eliza walked toward Adrian, who waited at the altar looking like he might actually cry. "You're beautiful," he said when she reached him. "You're biased." Completely, hopelessly, permanently. They wrote their own vows. Eliza spoke about choosing courage over comfort, about building partnership instead of possession, about love that grew stronger through challenge rather than weakening. Adrian promised to see her always, to value her mind as much as her heart, to stand beside her through every fight, every victory, every moment of doubt and triumph. "I promise," he said, "to never stop choosing you, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because you make me better. You make everything better." They exchanged rings, real rings this time, not hasty signatures on contracts. They kissed while everyone applauded, and for one perfect moment everything was exactly right. At the reception, Eliza found herself standing with Lady Westfield, watching Adrian dance with Caroline. "You've done well," the Marchioness said. "We've done well. I couldn't have managed any of this without your guidance." "Guidance is cheap. Courage is rare. You had the courage. I just pointed you in useful directions." Lady Westfield sipped her champagne. "What's next for you? More reforms? More business investments? Taking over Parliament?" "I was thinking about writing," Eliza said, "about everything that's happened, the conspiracy, the reforms, the foundation, so other women can learn from it, see that change is possible." "A book? A memoir? Or maybe a guide? I haven't decided yet." Eliza watched Adrian laugh at something Caroline said. "But I think our story deserves to be told properly. Not by newspapers that sensationalize everything, but by us, honestly." "Including the mistakes?" "Especially the mistakes. That's how people learn, from seeing that even success involves failure and fear and doubt. You're going to make enemies with a book like that." "I've made enemies doing everything else. Why stop now?" Lady Westfield laughed. "You've learned well. I had an excellent teacher." 10 years after the accidental contract signing, Eliza's memoir was published. The Overlooked Duchess, From Accident to Advocacy, became one of the year's best-selling books. Not because it was scandalous, though it was honest about the conspiracy and assassination attempt, but because it was real. Women read about Eliza's fear and self-doubt and moments of failure. They read about Adrian's support and the community of women who'd helped her. They read about changing laws and building businesses and refusing to be quiet when silence was easier. And they wrote letters, thousands of them, saying thank you, saying they'd been inspired to start businesses, demand fair treatment, refuse bad marriages, speak up when they'd normally stayed silent. "You're more influential than half of Parliament," Adrian said one evening, sorting through the latest batch of correspondence. "That's terrifying. That's magnificent." He pulled her onto his lap, despite her protest that they were too old for such behavior. "You set out to prove that being overlooked wasn't the same as being worthless." "I'd say mission accomplished." "The mission isn't accomplished. There's still so much to do. There will always be more to do. That's not a failure. That's life." Adrian kissed her. "But for tonight, can we just celebrate what we have accomplished? Together?" Eliza looked around their study, now filled with her books alongside his business ledgers, her correspondence mixed with his contracts. Evidence of a partnership that had become something neither could have predicted. "Together," she agreed. 15 years after the contract signing, Blackthorne House hosted its annual foundation gathering. Now they needed 3 ballrooms to hold everyone. The foundation had expanded beyond England, supporting women's initiatives across Europe and into the Americas. Eliza's memoir had been translated into a dozen languages, and the legal reform she'd fought for had inspired similar changes in other countries. "Remember when you thought you didn't belong here?" Adrian asked, watching the crowd from the balcony. "I remember thinking I'd made a terrible mistake." "Did you?" "The worst mistake of my life. Eliza said solemnly, then smiled. Or the best accident. I still can't decide which. Definitely an accident. Nobody plans to change the world by signing the wrong paper. Nobody plans to change the world at all. It just happens. One choice at a time. One stubborn refusal to stay quiet. One woman deciding she's worth more than society says. One duke realizing the woman he accidentally married is worth more than everything he intentionally built. Sentimental. Accurate. Below them, women gathered, laughing, networking, planning their next ventures. Women who'd been told they weren't enough, weren't qualified, weren't worthy. Women who'd decided to prove those voices wrong. And at the center of it all, the accidental duchess who'd become impossible to ignore. Do you ever wish things had gone differently? Eliza asked. That you'd voided the contract, found someone more suitable? Never. Not even when I'm being stubborn and difficult? Especially then. Adrian pulled her close. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You know that, right? You've mentioned it once or twice. Not enough. I should say it more. His arms tightened around her. You changed my life, Eliza. Made me better. Made me want to be better. Showed me that control isn't strength. Trust is. You changed mine too, Eliza said softly. Saw me when no one else did. Chose me when you didn't have to. Stood beside me through everything. Always. Always, she agreed. They stood together as the gathering continued below. Two people who'd started as an accident and become a choice. Who'd faced conspiracy and assassination and social condemnation. Who'd changed laws and built foundations and proved that worth wasn't something given by others, it was something you claimed for yourself. The overlooked daughter had become a duchess, an author, an activist. The cold duke had become a partner, a supporter, a man defined not by what he controlled, but by what he chose to build. And the marriage that never should have existed became the kind of partnership that changed the world. Not through perfection, not through flawless execution, but through stubbornly, imperfectly, courageously choosing each other, every single day. Sometimes the best things in life really did begin with a mistake, with signing the wrong paper, with being overlooked for so long that you learned to see yourself clearly instead of through others' eyes. Sometimes you just had to trust that the accident was actually destiny, and the mistake was actually the first step toward becoming exactly who you were meant to be. Eliza Blackthorne, once Eliza Wren, overlooked daughter, stood on that balcony and knew with absolute certainty she belonged here. Not because she'd earned it through perfect behavior or conventional beauty or submissive agreement, but because she'd fought for it, built it, refused to accept that accidents defined her, and in refusing, had defined herself. The woman no one noticed had become the force no one could ignore, and that was worth every risk, every fight, every terrifying moment when she'd thought she'd fail. Because in the end, she hadn't failed. She'd won, not by becoming someone else, but by refusing to be anyone except exactly who she was. Stubborn, imperfect, brilliant, brave, and absolutely, undeniably, magnificently herself.